Hey guys, how are you all? Welcome to Let's Start Story on What If Naruto Was Destroyed Relationship with Hinata After Lost Memories. So do 4 blue hearts comment. Be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video, and please share with your friends and watch till end. Also check out Patreon, for I have upload Harry x Hermione uncensored spicy version, link in description. Breathe. He sucked in as much air he could into his lungs. It was cold and felt sharp inside his chest. Then he released the air. Now, wake up. And he did. His eyes snapped open and darted around. He looked around. Where was he? Everything was white. It was cold. He shivered. Suddenly he felt a sharp and throbbing pain through his skull. He wanted to scream. His head was pounding. Now he was more aware of the rest of his body. He felt numb in the arm, and his stomach. He couldn't explain the pain he felt there. He felt as if part of it was ripped. He moved his hand down to grasp the spot. He screamed. The pain was too much. Noises. Now he heard noises besides his own. They weren't nice ones. No, he felt panic rise to his chest. He heard the running footsteps. They sounded a little crunchy. Why? He looked around again. It was snow. But he had no time to think about that. They were coming closer. Run. He slowly staggered to his feet. So much pain he felt. His head continued to throb. His stomach felt as if someone stabbed him and started to twist the knife in him. He bit his bottom lip to keep himself from screaming. He didn't even notice how his arm hung loosely at his side. But he did know it hurt to even try and move it. At first he began walking, but when he heard them he felt fear and panic rise to his chest. His pace picked up and soon he was running, though at a steady pace. They caught up enough to see him. They yelled at him to stop. But he didn't listen. He continued to run as if his life depended on it. Because it did. Bang! Something hit the ground ahead of him in incredible speed. It was something small. That noise was familiar. Yes, it came to him. It was the sound of a gunshot. They wanted to kill him. Bang! 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 More gunshots. This time one hit him. In his back. He released a scream so loud it was ear-shattering. He didn't stop running though. He kept going. Something was coming into view. A road. It was a busy road. A road entering the city. What city? He wasn't sure, but he ran onto the road without thinking. He yelled for help, any help at all. Crash. The truck hit him, though by the speed it didn't mean to. He fell over. He couldn't move. His vision was blurry, but cars now stopped and people surrounded him. The noises were now drowning. He felt a massive weight on his chest. Exhaustion spread over his body. Sleep. And everything went black. Take it. The black-haired young man said, handing him a necklace. He clasped both his hands around the other man's, forcing him to ball up his hand around the jewel. The black-haired man didn't appear to be in good shape at all. He had dark circles and bags under his eyes. His lip was busted with blood seeping out. His right eye was perfectly black, but it was swollen closed. You could tell it was recent. His body didn't look so good either. Who was this man? He was so familiar. He tried to move and speak. But he couldn't. Why? This was his own body. Everything was so cloudy. He didn't understand. No. You hold on to it. You're coming with me, remember? He spoke. His voice was strained and quivering. Why was he so scared? What was wrong with him? He didn't even feel like this was him speaking. But it was. The black-haired man shook his head. Me and you both know that's not gonna happen. The man's eyes seemed to flicker sadness in them. He felt his heart drop. But why? He didn't know this guy. He didn't. But he did. Call her for me, tell her I'm sorry, and he was cut off by noises of other people running down the hall and yelling. They're here. Now go, He pushed him ahead and ran toward the noises. He stopped watching him go down the hall. He felt the urge to go after him. To stop him, to save him. But he couldn't. He had an assignment to finish. It was one of the most important he had ever been given. Though couldn't move, he couldn't leave his friend behind. Yes, that was right. The black-haired man was his friend. He didn't know how, or what his name was. Heck, he didn't even know his own name. Naruto. A voice yelled. Naruto. Yes, that was his name. Naruto was his name. He then realized that the black-haired man stopped. Naruto, hurry, go. And without saying another word, his body reacted and broke out into a run. He soon heard his companions' cries in pain. It pinched his heart. But he had to keep going. Finally they caught up, yelling at him to stop. No, he kept going. Soon they started shooting. There was a window up ahead, they missed and shot it several times. It was a dead end. Naruto wrapped his arms around his face and jumped out the window. It broke when he hit. Probably because of the bullets that weakened it. It wasn't that far of a drop. But how and what he landed on didn't help his situation. It went through him so easily. It was some strange piece of glass. It went through him all the way. But he didn't scream, he couldn't scream. Because his head had hit the ground. Not enough to kill him, but just enough to confuse him. Immobilize him. It wasn't just that either, his arms seemed to be out of its socket. He just wanted to lay there. But he couldn't, he lifted himself up. He screamed, but tried to muffle it with his hand. Pulling himself off of that thing was a painful experience, excruciating. He didn't have time to complain, he began to run in the cold weather. He ran and he ran and he ran and he ran. He was so busy running he hadn't been able to feel how much blood he was losing. So soon he fell over and he was out. Wake up. He was awake now, but this time in less pain. He was more conscious. He walked around and found that he was in a hospital room. He felt more at ease. He sighed and sunk back into his bed. He closed his eyes to remember what happened. And he found that he couldn't remember anything beyond that. His eyes snapped open. He couldn't remember who he was. Not his family, not his friends, not his home. Nothing. He silently bit his bottom lip. He didn't want to move, but he had to get up. He had to get answers. And now. Please stop. A feminine voice yelled. Even though she yelled, it sounded soft and kind. It comforted him, so he laid back down. The owner of the voice soon appeared. It was a nurse. A cute nurse. But Naruto didn't think about how cute she looked. She seemed to have worried eyes. Looking at her face you could tell she didn't have much sleep. She must have been constantly working. And she looked so worried and so sad. She looked quite pitiful, which didn't look well on a pretty face. It just broke the heart. In fact, Naruto felt sympathy and pity for her, more than he felt for himself. And that was weird considering he had no idea what her problem was. The nurse wiped her face for tears that weren't even there. She looked back at the man and spoke softly. We found you on the road. You were hit by a truck. Yes, he remembered it. He squeezed his eyes shut, it even hurt to remember that. You were out for 2 weeks. She continued, looking down at a clipboard in her hands. But she constantly and nervously kept looking back and forth from him to the board. Though, he didn't even think about that. He was trying to figure out what he was doing before the accident. What he missed, why he was out. The nurse continued, the impact of the truck could have damaged your brain. So, can you tell me anything about yourself? She asked, with her eyes permanently on him. He looked down at his hands, that were on his lap. Memories filled his head, about the world. The things he'd seen or learned. But nothing about himself. Not one thing about himself. Not friends, not family, nothing. His hands balled into fist from the frustration he felt at himself. Why couldn't he remember? He was trembling, though he didn't know why. I don't even know my name. His voice was trembling just as much as his body. It was quiet and a little scratchy. The nurse knew from his movements that he couldn't tell her anything. She tightened her grip on her clipboard. You have amnesia. She spoke quietly. But that word made everything clear to him. It explained his lack of memories, yet it didn't comfort him whatsoever. He looked at the nurse, wanting to ask a few questions of his own. Maybe she knew something about him. Or at least knew someone who knew him. But her face looked disappointed, and at any moment she looked like she was going to burst into tears. Shish. He looked like she was expecting real answers from him. So he repeated what he had said before. But this time more gentle and sad. I don't even know my name. Quote. As if in response she nodded. She turned to walk away, maybe to get the doctor. Heck, if he knew. Before she began walking, she whispered something. He didn't quite catch it, so asked her before she walked through the doors. She turned around with her hand laid on the door. I said, your name is Uzumaki Naruto. And with that she left. The name bounced around in his head until it sunk in. Yes, that was his name. He remembered that strange black hair man called him that. He would have to thank that nurse later. The happiness that he felt left him as quickly as it came. Who was that man anyway? And why did he remember him out of, well, anyone else? Like his parents. Whoever he was, he would have to find him. He had the key to his memories, he had to. Not so long after, the doctor came in and asked questions of his own. Naruto didn't feel like talking anymore. But he answered to the best of his abilities. Days passed on and on. Everything seemed so slow-paced to him. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was supposed to do something. Then on the day he was to leave the hospital, that nurse came in. He hadn't seen her in a while. She looked a lot better than before, but still didn't look well. She told him how they found a nice lady for him to stay with. She was supposed to help gain his memories. Then she gave him his things he came with. They were all clean and fixed. He looked through his stuff and found a necklace. "I don't even wear jewelry," he muttered, frowning at the necklace. Yes, he didn't have his memories. But he knew that was one thing he didn't do. And if he did, for the first time he saw a hint of a smile on the nurse's lips. It was a huge improvement on her face. Someone as pretty as her shouldn't look so sad. "Well, it was on you when we brought you in. So I guess you did," she told him in a teasing manner. And that was another improvement for her. It made him feel less uncomfortable around her, and he pitied her less. He smirked, and replied, "Well, that will have to change." And she laughed quietly. Naruto felt that he'd accomplished something, and even felt a burst of happiness break all over him. All the time he spent in the hospital sucked. Every time he woke up and found himself in that room, it reminded him that he had gotten an accident. And with the doctors and nurses constantly reminding him just made him frustrated. He already knows. Seriously. It hurt him more. Though all the time he spent there made him remember another thing about himself. That he hated hospitals. "Okay, get ready, your taxi will be here soon. She's waiting." Naruto nodded, and even though he didn't want to put the necklace on, something told him he had to. That it was a life or death matter for him. So he did, though he made sure to put it under his shirt. He didn't want anyone to see he was wearing jewelry. Before the nurse left he asked another question. What was her name again? He gave an innocent curious look. Though he was unconscious that he was doing such. The nurse looked at him, and this time she actually smiled. "Her name is Hyuga Hinata. And I think you will really like her." "I do." Konoha. It was a city, he knew that. He knew he was in Konoha. He had seen that name hundreds of times in the hospital. In fact, the name of the hospital was Konohagakure's Downtown Hospital. But knowing the name of the city was much different seeing the city itself. Naruto had seen the city on television, and might have seen some snaps on the newspaper at his time in the hospital. But actually being outstanding in the city was much different indeed. It seemed more real. He could finally see how tall the buildings, how the cars drove by, and more. Though, it didn't seem new whatsoever. It was like he had seen all before. That he got up every day and saw the same old routine. Naruto couldn't help but feel that that was strange. But he tried to do the math, and figured he'd probably lived here before. Before whatever happened. It irritated Naruto that he couldn't remember anything. Yet, everything was so how familiar. Like he had seen before. It was so annoying, he tried not to think about it. But how could you not think about it? He had amnesia. He couldn't help but shiver at the word. He came to just to hate that word. Mainly because how much the doctors and nurses, even the janitors, reminded him he had it. Amnesia. It seemed to be the problem behind everything. Because he couldn't remember. But, he came up with a solution. It wasn't solid, but it helped his situation. He decided to ask questions. It was simple, obvious, and easy, right? Wrong. It seemed no one wanted to talk to him. At all. He would ask questions, and the nurses would answer curtly before telling him to rest. He also hated that the staff to the hospital seemed caught up in their work they couldn't even bother having a nice chit-chat with him. Not that he blamed them, but still. He needed someone he could talk to explain how he felt, to laugh with, to cry with. Someone to be his friend. That's what he wanted. No, that's what he needed. And for some reason, he thought the taxi driver that he was currently sitting in the car wouldn't mind talking with him. Though, Naruto couldn't be farther from the truth. The taxi driver was getting more and more annoyed with each and every word Naruto Blonde talked too much. But could you blame him? He did wake up without any memories of himself. But the driver did blame him. His job was to only take Naruto to some lady, not be all buddy-buddy with him. Naruto didn't seem to get that though, he continued to talk. Mainly asking questions. He figured maybe the driver wouldn't bother it as much as the hospital did. Naruto only glanced at the driver once only to read his name tag. Seto Takizawa. You know, you really have a nice name. Naruto changed the topic randomly for like the 100th time during the ride. He wore the most innocent and sweet smile. It also didn't hurt that he had a handsome face. How could anyone be mad at that? Well, the Seto was. He tried to suppress a groan then answered, not hiding his irritation. Thank you, he said shortly, hoping to end the conversation. But no, Naruto continued. My name is Naruto. Ya know. Like fish cake, in ramen. He said through a small chuckle. Who would name their son after fish cake? Not that Naruto didn't like his name. In fact he loved it. But he bet other people found it strange. Yes, I know. And you already told me your name. Twice in fact. The driver replied in short burst. Naruto laughed again, this time nervously. It was almost as if he sensed the irritation in Seto's voice. The blonde rubbed the back of his neck, unconsciously. Oh right, my bad. But anyway, Naruto was cut off by Seto, who finally lost his patience. Listen dude, I'm not your friend. My job is to only get you to this lady, unpack your bags and leave. He said shortly once again. He didn't even bother to try and be polite. I understand you have amnesia and all, but still. No more talking, he said, his voice calming now that Naruto was silent. But Naruto frowned deeply. Now even a taxi driver had to remind him. Great. Do you understand? He said, slowly as if Naruto was a child who couldn't comprehend what he was saying. Naruto only sighed and nodded, then he turned his head to look out the window. His heart dropped. Well, now he knew the taxi driver wasn't going to be his friend. But he so much hoped this Hyuga lady would. What was he kidding? She was technically another doctor, so of course she wouldn't be his friend. Again Naruto sighed. Would there ever be anyone to help him in the way he wanted? Seto. Naruto called his name out. He wanted to ask him if he knew anything about his doctor, but before he could continue the driver cut him off, reminding him to stay quiet or would dump him out on the sidewalk. So Naruto frowned and went quiet again. What a jerk. He couldn't help but think. He tried to think about something else as he watched the buildings that they passed by. He couldn't help but feel he knew his way around this city. That he knew the layout, like he walked around this city hundreds of times before. But he'd push that thought away, knowing it would lead back to the word amnesia. Though, he was interested in all the little shops they passed. It made him smile to see the stuff that they showed in the windows. The one building that caught his eye was some restaurant named Ichiraku. Again it sounded familiar and everything. But this time two faces flashed in his mind when they passed it. He didn't really recognize them, but they were familiar. It was an older man and a woman. Who were they? He didn't know, but he mentally marked Ichiraku, one of the places to investigate. After the short, or what seemed like short, conversation with the taxi driver Seto Takizawa, they arrived to his destination. Naruto was surprised to see how nice the building looked. It was a flat building, but it seemed expensive to live in. Though, Naruto felt that in his past life he could afford to do more than pay to just live there. He gazed at the flat building in awe. He only took a few steps forward. At that moment a thought went through his mind. If that Hyuga lady owned 3 flats here, including one being her office, she must be a snob. Naruto couldn't help but wrinkle his nose at the thought. For some reason, he didn't like that she might be a rich snob. But how could he feel that way? He didn't even remember meeting a snob. Maybe he just remembered how they acted. Well, either way he was probably about to meet one now. But he wondered how she would look. Maybe all dressed up in unique clothing or, hey, come on. His thoughts were interrupted by Seto. The driver really didn't want to be an escort too. But he was paid extra to make sure Naruto actually came face to face with Lady. So, he wanted hurry and do this so he could get far, far, far away from the blonde loser. Naruto followed the older M into the door and waited patiently for him to call the woman. He looked at the name tags next to the buttons. He spotted hers almost right away. In neat handwriting it read, Hinata Hyuga. Before Seto spotted Noro pressed the button. Then came the beep sound, and then a voice of a woman. It was soft and sweet to Naruto. And sounded innocent. Whatever that meant. Though when she spoke, he LD her acceptance and understanding in her voice. That she was there for him. But that didn't make any sense considering the only word she spoke was, hello. He must have been daydreaming. Realizing he was quiet and left a long pause. He thought he should speak. Though he didn't know why Seto did not respond. Hello. Is this Hyuga Hinata? He asked, nervously. There was a stifled giggle on the other line. Naruto couldn't help but smile nervously. It was kind of cute, that giggle of hers. Naruto found himself giggling a little, he didn't know why. Not even a second later he felt Seto's gaze on him. He gave Naruto a face. It was mixed with confusion and disgust. Naruto didn't have an answer so he shrugged at him. Hey, laughing can get contagious. For a minute he almost missed the woman's reply. Yes, I am Hinata. And may I ask who you are? Naruto felt shock rush through his body for a split second. He had no idea. She didn't sound like anything he imagined her to sound like. She didn't even sound professional. But she did sound lovable and kind, like a person he could get along with. Naruto froze in place, suddenly he felt awkward and stupid. He shuffled a little, looking down. Well, just because she sounded kind didn't she was. Yes, that though gave him courage, plus he haven't even seen her yet. He glanced at Seto hoping to get a nod. As if Seto had read his mind, and understood him. But Seto didn't, so instead he was glaring at the blonde, which put him back on topic. I'm Naruto. Uzumaki Naruto. There was a gasp onto the other line, oh, please come in. Sorry I didn't recognize your voice. I'll meet you in the lobby. Naruto nodded, though she couldn't see him. There was one question going through his head, what did she mean by, sorry I didn't recognize your voice? It bothered him, he never remembered even talking to her. Again his thoughts were interrupted by Seto grabbing him by the arm and dragging him inside. The heat inside the building smacked Naruto right in the face. It was such a difference from the cold air outside. In fact he warmed up pretty fast. So he took off his jacket. Seto probably would have done the same if it wasn't for the fact he was leaving soon. Then she came walking up to them. At first Naruto didn't know it was her. She was beautiful, shockingly beautiful. But something told him it was her, he recognized her. He didn't know of him had a pretty simple conclusion. But he wasn't going to believe it just yet. Naruto. She said exclaimed excitedly. She raised her arms slightly as if she was ready to give him a hug. And to be honest he wanted a hug, seriously. Though he wouldn't admit it, after all she was a complete stranger. Yet, it didn't feel that way. Hinata. He replied awkwardly. Hinata came face to face with Naruto. And she didn't hug him. Which surprised him a little. But it didn't disappoint him. In a way he was a little relieved, even if he did want a hug he still just met her. Hinata wore a nervous yet excited on her face. But by her movements it seemed her nervousness overpowered her excitement. Welcome, Naruto-kun. I'm your doctor. Oh. Naruto said shaping his lips exactly like an, oh. By now he really should have been used to the idea of this lady being his doctor. But it was still so weird. Hinata smiled slightly and looked from him to Seto, who seemed just as surprised to say. This beautiful woman standing before them. Thank you, Takizawa-san. She nodded gracefully at him, I'm sure you have plenty to do, so I will take Naruto off of your hands now. She spoke to him with kindness and respect in her voice. Which surprised Seto yet made him feel nice. Cab drivers never really get much respect nor kindness toward them. Suddenly he couldn't help but feel slightly annoyed. And even jealous. How could such a hopeless idiot like Naruto get to live with such a wonderful woman? It was sad. He was sad. He was sad because he was jealous of a man who had amnesia. He really had to get his head cleared. He nodded quietly at Hinata, because he really didn't know what to say. Then he shot Naruto a glare. It took Naruto a little while to notice it, but once he did he felt a cool chill go down his spine. Why didn't Takizawa-san like him? I mean he liked Takizawa. To a degree. Then Naruto felt annoyed at Takizawa. How dare he treat him this way, he was a person too. And he felt a little obliged to say something to the cabbie. Probably helped that the cab driver couldn't kick him out of the car now. He watched Seto leave and started to think of the words he wanted to say. Finally it hit him. It should insult all cabbies. And you a terrible driver too. He called out to the man. It felt nice to get that off of his chest. A small smirk formed on his face. He looked at Hinata from the corner of his eye. She seemed to have a look of disappointment, which made Naruto feel slightly shameful. But that washed away quickly when he saw Seto flip him off without even looking at him. Man, people in Konoha were rude. What a guy, huh? He said to Hinata, hoping to break the awkwardness that he felt while with her, alone. Hinata smiled nervously. Yeah. She said quietly. Come on, I'll show you your flat. She gestured toward the elevator. But Naruto couldn't help but wonder why she was nervous. If anyone should be, it was him, yet for some reason he didn't feel all that nervous. A little uncomfortable and awkward. But not nervous. Naruto stepped into the elevator with Hinata following him in. She pressed a number to a floor and the doors closed. She pressed floor 7, he thought. Well, it didn't matter. He'd figure out eventually. Do you want me to take your coat? She asked politely. No, I got it. Naruto didn't know why, but he had said it just as politely. Though the past few days he talked to anyone anyway he wanted to. So he really didn't know why he was acting this way. And the elevator ride seemed like it was taking forever. The awkwardness and silence was overbearing. Ding. Finally the doors opened and Hinata led him to his flat, which was even nicer than the outside of the building. The interior design was what he would choose, but it was cool, he supposed. The furniture looked almost new. Honestly, the whole place looked new. Naruto set his coat on the main couch's arm and looked around. For a second he forgot Hinata was even there. She looked at him with such a pretty smile and asked, "Do you like it?" He was quiet for a minute. Did he like it? Of course he did. He could be sleeping on the streets right now if she hadn't accepted to take him in. Then for the first time he came face to face with her. He offered a smile of his own. It was his innocent yet lovable smile. Yes, I love it. More than that. Thank you, Hyuga-san. He spoke the words warmly and soft. It wasn't curt or polite like he had been in the elevator. Hinata's cheeks seemed to go slightly red for a moment, and her smile seemed more happy. Oh, I'm glad. She replied, the excitement was so clear in her throat. She stood there for a second and Naruto looked back at the couch and saw a neatly pair of folded clothes. He frowned slightly. What's this? He asked, holding them up for her to see. Hinata looked at them before speaking. I brought you a new pair of clothes. The hospital said you only had the ones you came in with. I don't know if you'll like them. But we can buy more later. Hinata answered, looking him straight in the face. Which for some reason made him turn his gaze. Oh thanks, again. No problem, you should probably change into them. I wanna take you out. Naruto blinked. She wanted to take him out. Like on a date. Not that he wasn't attracted to her or anything, but they had more important things. Like her doing sessions with him, and him gaining his memories. And the fact that she was his doctor too didn't help. Naruto could feel his cheeks warm a bit. He had to say something. Listen Hinata, not that I don't like you or anything. But I don't really want to start a relationship at this time. Ya know? He asked. He felt that he made it pretty clear and easy to understand. Hinata stared at him in confusion. She didn't understand what he was saying or where this was coming. She spoke what was on her mind. Yeah, what? Naruto sighed heavily. It seemed to have come from the bottom of his toes. I don't want to date you right now. Hinata's face was pale for a moment then flushed. Naruto quickly spoke. But maybe after we get through this thing. He hoped those words would comfort her. Hinata shook her head vigorously. And no. You got it all wrong. I meant I would take you outside, in the city to walk around. She spoke quickly, so quickly Naruto didn't understand for a moment, but when he did he felt embarrassed. Ooh, he chuckled nervously, rubbing the back of his head. Hinata had calmed down now too, she even sighed relieved. He was also relieved. Sorry. No, it's fine, I can see why you mistook it that way. I should have worded it differently. Quote. Naruto smiled again, he was glad she didn't call him dumb or slow. Honestly, he expected her to, he was used to hearing the doctors mumble it. But he wasn't stupid, and he knew this. He just woke up with amnesia. He was just confused. So, you should change now. Hinata spoke again, she stood there with her hands clasped. It was kind of cute to Naruto. But it probably would have been cute to anyone else too. And it was strange that a doctor, doctor, looked cute. He tried not to think about it. Naruto nodded at Hinata, agreeing with her. He lifted up his new shirt in his hands and examined it. It was orange, not too bright or too dark. And he liked it. He set it down to pull the current shirt he had on when he stopped. He had almost forgot Hinata was here. Not that he was shy. But it was the principles of privacy, right? Plus, to be sincere, he didn't want her to see his wound he earned. In his opinion, they were nasty when he unbandaged them. He looked at Hinata expectantly. He was sure she would understand. But she stood there staring him down, and when he looked her in the face she would look down. This seemed to last for about a minute, before Naruto coughed into his fist. That's when she finally understood. She blushed for a second and squeezed her eyes shut. Oh, so sorry. She turned around to walk out the door, but hit the frame, which resulted in an ow. She moved her hands to caress her throbbing forehead. Naruto couldn't help but smile a little, though it might have been awful wicked of him. Don't get him wrong, he wasn't laughing at Hinata. It was just that he was glad he wasn't the only one who goofed up. Like when he was in the hospital. He accidentally pulled the IV from his arm and almost bled out if it wasn't for the nurse who came in. That was scary. Naruto's smile soon melted as a question resurfaced in his head. A question that he was meaning to ask since he met her. "Hey Hyuga-san," he said smoothly. The M.I.D. night-haired girl had stepped out the hall, still soothingly rubbing her forehead, but she turned around to look at him. She looked at him quizzically. "Why are you being so nice to me?" he finally asked. It was such a simple question. Yet he felt it was more than simple. Her answer would tell him what he would feel toward him. And he was slightly astonished when the corners of her mouth curved into a small smile. It was that beautiful smile that she had gave him before. And for some reason it gave him comfort. He had never been smiled upon so much in one day since he woke up. And then she gave the answer he wanted to hear. The words he wanted to hear, since he figured out he had almost couldn't believe it came out of her mouth. "Because, I want to be your friend, Naruto-kun." Just for a moment he thought she was lying. But he knew he was dead wrong. He felt so warm in the chest. He even felt his chest tighten. It was painful but enjoyable for some reason. He liked the feeling, and so he Avenue his own beautiful smile of his own. And he gave her the best reply he could think of. "Awesome." Hinata nodded and started to pull up the door. "And please call me Hinata." And before she shut the door, he still saw that gorgeous smile on her face. Even after she closed the door, that smile was implanted in his head. That was all he could think about at that moment. Yeah, here you guys go. I hope you enjoy. Favorite, follow, and most of all review. Also Naruhina, Sasusaku, Inasai, Chokar and Shika Tem are all canon. Woo, can't wait for the last movie to come out. It's mainly about Naruto and Hinata. Naruto silently released a breath from his mouth. He hadn't realized he started holding his breath since him and Hinata exited his new home. He watched his breath's smoky figure float in the air. He also hadn't realized how cold it was, till now. The new coat he was given by Hinata had really made a difference. He had so much to thank the pretty doctor for. Though just saying thanks was getting old now. He would have to actually do something for her. The blonde continued walking down the city sidewalks in the cold next to his doctor. With each and every step, and every building he passed by, it all started to feel familiar. It started to feel old to him. And he didn't even feel like he could get lost. He had seen it all before. Sometimes when he stared at a building too long, he pictured himself standing there. It was a warm feeling. He definitely knew this was his home. Now he just had to get to know it again. He sighed lightly. He really wished all his memories would magically fly back to him. He knew it was going to be a long process, and he knew that some people never got their memories back. He really hoped he wasn't one of those guys. Even though walking around the city was nice and relaxing, he couldn't help but feel a little frustrated. He liked this walk and all, but he thought he should be getting to work on his memories. Right, maybe he was just being impatient. Naruto turned to look at Hinata with a sideways glance. She seemed to be burying her face in her scarf for warmth. Naruto's lips curved into a small smile. Why time he looked at her he couldn't help but feel this pang of joy. Perhaps it was because she was his first friend since he was released from the hospital. He liked her a lot. She had told him to ask any questions, and he did. And in return she answered each one of them to the best of her abilities, even the really awkward ones. But he couldn't help but think that she liked him asking questions. Maybe because with each one, they found each other becoming more comfortable and closer to each other. It was a nice feeling. To know someone was your friend. It was such a warm feeling. Warm feelings were good. So, Naruto started looking forward again. He had noticed he was staring and something told him that was rude. Hinata looked up at him sideways with her cheeks slightly red. It was most likely from the cold. So, she responded. Naruto shrugged, he didn't honestly know. He just spoke. But as soon as he realized he did have one question in the back of his mind. When are we going to start our first session? He asked innocently. He was just curious. No big rush. Not. Hinata smiled through her scarf. He could see it in her eyes. We already started our session. We started as soon as we walk out the door. She answered kindly. Naruto raised both brows. Really? He was confused. If they had started, why was he the one asking all the questions? And why weren't they in her office? He was really confused. Lost, to be more accurate. Well, why don't you have any questions for me? And why are we not in your office? Hinata continued to smile and sighed lightly. She kept on walking. She didn't seem to be even thinking about how to answer his questions. Well, she began and paused again. We're doing this session outside because I want to show you the sea. Try and see if anything is familiar to you. She said quietly. And judging by your body language and how you've been leading us on a nice walking path. It is familiar to you. You've lived here before. Naruto hadn't realized it immediately. She was right. Out of all the paths in the city he led them down a nice walking path. One where not too many people walk on, but it was friendly too. Whether he was doing it unconsciously or not he didn't know. Second, I want you to know me. So you will feel comfortable with me. I know I'm your friend. But I'm also still your doctor. She shrugged lightly. I have my methods. Naruto slowly broke out into a grin. Hinata was smart, and beautiful, and friendly. Was there anything else he hadn't discovered yet? Well, he would have to wait and see. Naruto nodded at her. Oh. He chuckled. He didn't know why, he just felt like it and Hinata smiled deeply at this. Ah, you're amazing Hinata-chan. He spoke loudly looking up, still grinning. He was so lucky to have Hinata by his side. He wondered if he didn't have amnesia would he still have met her. He didn't know, but he didn't try to think about it. She was here and that was all that mattered. Hinata's cheeks flushed a deeper red as she averted her eyes to the ground. Though Naruto didn't notice, and if he had he would have mistaken it. Probably would have thought it was just the cold. He looked back at her and was about to say something most likely really stupid next, but he came to a halt when he saw it. The lights were on illuminating the outside and inside. With its wide windows he could see inside. They were open. Ichiraku. It was so familiar. He didn't know why. But he was about to figure out. Hopefully. And Naruto-kun. Hinata looked at him raising an eyebrow, which brought him back to his senses. Naruto turned to look at her and smiled a little. Hey, Hinata, by any chance would you be hungry? He asked, hoping for a yes. Hinata blinked at him, she certainly wasn't all that hungry. Was it even lunchtime? Hinata looked down at her watch, no it wasn't lunchtime but close. She looked up at Naruto to answer but this time she noticed his eyes on Ichiraku. Suddenly she understood, and a small smile formed on her lips. Well, she hadn't treated him out yet had she? Sure, Naruto-kun. You want to eat at Ichiraku's? She asked, kindly as usual. Naruto nodded without hesitation, boy would I. He said almost exactly like a child. Come on. He grabbed her hand and dragged her along. Hinata couldn't help but blush a bit. He so easily closed the gap between them, and now here they were walking to Ichiraku's. Hinata couldn't help but notice Naruto had a strong grip. And Naruto couldn't help but notice she had small hands. Naruto pushed open the door to Ichiraku and he could smell the delicious spices of the ramen filling his nose. The aroma itself was mouthwatering and the warm air around just made everything so welcoming. Naruto sighed happily like he returned to his long-lost home. That was it. He belonged here. He hadn't realized he was still holding hands with Hinata so he ended up dragging her to a seat. He sat down with Hinata sitting next to him and then turned to her, this place is awesome. He grinned. And Hinata giggled shaking her head before saying, but you haven't even tried their ramen yet. Then Naruto chuckled, "Hey, guess not. I hope it's good. I know you'll like it." Hinata warmly smiled, before picking up her phone. It had buzzed and now she was checking it out. At the same time Naruto couldn't help but stare at her, she was very pretty. No beautiful. But that wasn't why he stared. She was familiar too. He sort of felt like he saw her face before. All this thinking was going to fry his brain. So he stopped staring and he didn't notice Hinata's body slump in relief. The blonde placed his hands in his pockets and glanced around the shop. It wasn't too big but it was welcoming and warm. It kind of felt like a second home for Naruto. He turned around and saw a wall with pictures on it. He walked over and stared. In these pictures there was that man and woman that flashed in his head that one time, but they were always standing next to a different person. Whether it was a kid, teenager, or adult. Above the pictures there was a plate saying what year it was taken. Then he looked higher up and read, "Ramen Eating Champions." But the thing that bugged him was that 5 pictures were missing for 5 straight years. It looked as if someone had hung the pictures up but took them down. He frowned slightly and tilted his head. And he turned to a woman who was leaving the shop with her daughter, "Excuse me. Do you know what happened to the pictures that were supposed to be here?" The woman simply shook her head, "No, but I know EY said it was some boy who had won 5 times straight. He was good friends with the owner here." And with that she walked out. Naruto sighed, who was that boy? Why would they take the pictures down if they were such good friends with him? Too much questions. Not enough answers. "Naruto-kun." Hinata called out to him. Naruto snapped out of his daze and walked back over to her and took his seat. Then a young woman who looked slightly older than them appeared. She gave some other customers their bowls, not even glancing at them before giving Naruto and Hinata their menus. "I'll be back in 5. And she swiftly made her way back to the kitchen. Naruto blinked. That word, familiar, came up again. It was almost as bad as amnesia. That woman was the woman that flashed in his head. He knew her. He knew her and he just knew he knew her. "Naruto, did you find what you want?" Again Hinata brought him back to earth. He looked down at his menu and decided to settle with barbecue pork ramen. He then nodded to Hinata and like the woman said she came back in 5 minutes with a smile on. When she stepped in front of the pair her smile dropped. And her face seemed to pale. And he didn't know why or how he knew what to say. Or why he smiled but he did what he did. "Oi, Ayame. I want the usual." Hinata looked at Naruto in confusion while Ayame looked at Naruto with shock. Naruto kept smiling but in the inside he had both feelings overwhelming him. He wondered how he knew her name. It was like his body reacted on its own, like this was normal for it. It seemed like hours passed but in reality it was a few seconds. Finally Hinata broke the silence, "Thank God." "Naruto, do you know her?" she asked, calmly. And at that moment Hinata did sound like a professional psychologist. Her voice sounded kind but strong. Sadly the only answer he could give her was a shrug. So they both turned back to Ayame who just now was realizing what was happening. "I don't know you." She shook her head innocently. Naruto couldn't help but frown, she had to know him. She just had to, otherwise what was up with the shocked look she gave? He could tell she was lying. It was all over her face. He opened his mouth to object but Hinata laid her hand on his to silence him. And it worked. He looked at her and she shook her head gently. Naruto's frown was gone and he sighed. He understood what Hinata was trying to say. She didn't want him to create a scene. But part of him wondered if she believed that this woman was lying too. It looked like it, but then again who knows. "I'll have barbecue pork ramen," he stated simply. The woman known as Ayame nodded, took Hinata's order, and headed off to the kitchen. As soon as she walked behind those doors, Naruto looked back at Hinata and frowned. "I know her. I know her," he told her strongly. Hinata only gently shook her head. "Naruto-kun, please wait." She whispered quietly to him. Naruto stared at her blankly. What was that supposed to mean? Seriously, why did everyone have to be so complicated? Naruto merely huffed, but obeyed Hinata in the way he thought she wanted him to. Naruto leaned his chin on the palm of his hand as he waited. He didn't feel like talking. He was too angry. But the more he sat there in silence his nerves started calm. He glanced at Hinata and she sat there quietly as well, it seemed like she was looking into space. At that moment Ayame came out with 2 steaming bowls of ramen. She wasn't smiling but she wasn't pale or nervous looking either. But Naruto ignored that, he was too busy staring at the bowl that was set in front of him. His whole face brightened up and he was now grinning from ear to ear. "Wow, this smells good," he said, cheerfully. It was meant for Ayame, and she knew that, so she smiled. "Well, Dad and I do make some pretty good ramen," she replied more friendly. Naruto grabbed his chopsticks, "Itadakimasu." And he dug in. Hinata giggled at this before following suit. "Send Tyuki my thanks." Tyuki? Who was that? It was Ayame's father, the chef. Ayame nodded with a smile still on her face, though it dropped when Naruto asked his next question. "So why did you lie about not knowing me?" His face was straight and he stopped eating for a second as he looked her straight in the eye. The atmosphere seemed to change, even Naruto himself noticed this. Ayame continued to stare back at him, she didn't answer straight away. She seemed a little shocked and she looked like she was looking for an answer. "Caught you." Naruto couldn't help but think. Her reactions were too slow or too fast. And she didn't even question how he knew her father's name or hers. He felt a small smirk growing on his lips. But his happiness seemed to lessen when he heard Hinata sigh. What was her deal anyway? She should be siding with him. Helping him out, she surely couldn't be falling for Ayame's lie. Right, she studied human nature, so if he could see she was doing then Hinata had to see as well. He didn't help but feel frustrated with the midnight-haired woman. One moment she seems like she's on his side and the other she's not. "Excuse me." He was knocked out of his thoughts by Ayame's response. "Excuse me." Really, that was the best she could say. Naruto opened his mouth to respond but he was interrupted by Hinata's obvious, long and loud sigh. Oh, he did not need this from her right now. Naruto whipped his head to look at her. And she gave him this look. That look that meant, "Don't you dare." In response to that look, he groaned but didn't put Ayame on the spotlight. "Sorry, ma'am, He trailed off. But she looked at him with a raised brow. Naruto looked back at her. "I just have amnesia. So sorry that I'm making accusations of you knowing me. Maybe I just saw or heard your name elsewhere." He sighed again. Not because he was sad that he had amnesia, but because Hinata was being so mean. He was so close too. Ayame's face softened as she looked at him sadly. "You have what?" she asked softly, though she heard the first time. "He has amnesia," Hinata answered back, with a weak smile. "I have what?" Naruto looked at her. Both women were quiet and stared him genuinely worried. Naruto slumped. "I was trying to joke around." Get it. I guess," they said in unison, but didn't laugh. Naruto sighed and went back to eating his ramen. Ramen, the only thing that made him happy at that moment. Naruto and Hinata walked down the icy and frosty sidewalk. They were quiet since they left the ramen shop. Mainly because of Naruto, he refused to talk to Hinata right now. She was supposed to be his partner, his teammate, his friend. Yet she didn't do anything but stop him from figuring out the truth. So when they left the shop he decided to give her the silent treatment. And so far it was boring, she didn't even try talking to him. So he found himself giving up after less than 10 minutes. At that time Hinata had called a cab because it was starting to get dark and super cold. So now here they were, about 12 inches apart, standing in the cold and silence. "Hinata." Naruto spoke reluctantly. He made sure to add that to his voice. He wanted her to understand he was frustrated with her. "Yes, Naruto-kun." She shivered, but she looked straight ahead into the street. Most likely looking for the cab she called. "Why did you stop me back there?" He went straight to the point. He learned from the TV shows in the hospital that beating around the bush never really worked. So he was going to be honest with himself and others. "I mean, you had to see she was clearly lying. I could have busted her. I mean, did you not see?" Hinata sighed in response and stopped her shivering. Of course she was lying, her body language, voice, and reaction spoke it all for her. "I knew she was lying. Then why? I stopped you because whatever reason she was lying must have been important." "Really?" Naruto scoffed. "Yes, I mean telling by her face it looked as if she didn't want to lie. She must have been close to you. And whatever reason she lied must have been important. So yeah, I didn't want to bust her. She'll tell you the truth when the time comes." Naruto frowned. He knew Hinata was right, she had to be, but he didn't want her to. He just was really tired of not knowing. If you're mad at me then oh okay. I don't blame you. She shivered again from a cold gust of wind. But I will still help you through this. So, she was cut off by Naruto wrapping his arm around her shoulder, and bring her closer to him. She was now warmer, but still cold. Though she couldn't help but ignore the cold, her face was heating up. Naruto. Naruto looked to the side so she couldn't see his face. If she had saw it she would have giggled. He was pouting slightly, like a child. You don't have to be so nice to me, especially if I'm hurting your feelings and whatever. Ya no. Hinata continued to look at him, she was slightly confused at what he was getting at. I'm not mad at you. So let's just forget this ever happened. She continued to look at him, finally understanding. Naruto turned to look at her and smiled brightly. So let's just forget this little thing. I mean we have a whole friendship ahead of us. Right. Hinata finally smiled back, happy to see him doing the same. Hi. She responded cheerfully. But she was soon conscious again of how close they were. I mean she literally had her chin laying on his chest now. Naruto-kun. Her face was heating up again. He looked at her innocently, which didn't help. Never mind. At that moment the cab pulled up and out came the cab driver with a smile. Oh, looks like there's love in the air tonight. He chuckled. No it's not like that. Hinata gently pushed away from Naruto. Naruto looked at the cab driver before smiling. Now here was one thing he did remember. Hey, I know you. You're Seto. And then Seto, the cab driver's smile dropped. Did he had to meet this guy twice on the same day? He wondered if it was too late to drive off. He could get fired, but it might be worth it. Then he looked at Hinata, he realized no one deserved to be alone with this baka. Get in. Now, he demanded. They needed to hurry before he changed his mind. And so Hinata and Naruto awkwardly climbed into the car. That was weird, right? I'm glad you're our cabbie. Naruto smiled. That rule I gave earlier today. About throwing you out if talking. It still applies. Seto said stiffly. Hinata raised an eyebrow at Naruto, but he sheepishly smiled and buried himself into the comfortable car seat. He was tired and cold, but now he was warm so he could easily fall asleep until they arrived home. Home. That was right, he was actually going home. Not his old one that he couldn't even remember, it was a new one. But it was still home. And he was absolutely sure it would be just fine. Especially since he was going home with Hinata. With her everything could be home. She was his friend. And with that happy thought Naruto drifted off into sleep. He was a kid, maybe 5 or 4. He couldn't tell, he was looking at the ceiling with tears in his eyes as he held a 9-tailed fox plushie close to him. He had had a nightmare, and he was waiting. Waiting for what though? He sniffled. What was his nightmare? He hated this feeling. The feeling of being stuck in his dream, or memory and still not know. Then the doors opened, and a woman came in. She was young and beautiful with long red hair. It was strange to see such red hair, but it looked cool and beautiful to him. The woman looked down at him and sat on the bed. Did you have a nightmare, Naruto-kun? She asked sweetly. He nodded and climbed onto her lap. It was terrible, mommy. He sniffled. So that's who she was. His mother. I had a bad dream where I was lost and no one would help me. I was all alone. He explained, tears running down his face. The woman smiled a little and gently wiped his tears away. Well, you don't need to be afraid, Naruto. You will never be alone. And you know why? Naruto shook his head. His mother shook his head as if it was obvious, because, silly, you have the most beautiful smile and personality. Everyone will want to help you. Naruto looked at her, he was feeling a lot better. You will never be alone or lost. Home is always with your loved ones. And guess what? What? Little Naruto asked, truly curious. I love you. She poked his belly. Naruto giggled but then rolled his eyes. I already knew that. But guess what? He wiggled his eyebrows playfully, and at that his mother giggled. What? She grinned. He moved his finger gesturing her to come closer and she did. He leaned in and cupped his hands around her ear and whispered. I love you more. His mother smiled brightly and made a look of shock. Though she really wasn't. No way. I love you more. She playfully pushed him. No I do, I love you the most. He giggled and fell onto his bed. Fine. His mother shook her head. Then I guess we're both home. Quote. And Naruto smiled. Hinata looked at the peacefully sleeping Naruto. They were close to home. She smiled and gently shook him awake when they arrived. "Naruto-kun, we're home," she said softly. Naruto groggily wiped his eyes, but when he looked at Hinata, "Guess what?" he smiled. "Heyo, I did it. I'm so sorry it came out so late, but I hope you guys will still read. I personally really like this chapter. Well, enjoy while I go get high on Naruhina. So make sure to review, favorite and follow. Because there will be more. And thank you for the reviews and favorites and follows. I appreciate it. Little Miss Kairi out. Tilda." Naruto sighed heavily as he looked out the window to his living room. He watched as the snow lightly fell. He was bored and there was nothing to do. He just sat there watching all the people walk by in their warm clothing. He wondered if he was once like those people, knowing where they were going and how they were going to do it. Because he really didn't know where his life was going at all. It seemed kind of blank. The only thing he really knew was 1. I am Uzumaki Naruto. 2. I have amnesia. 3. I must remember my past. That about summed it all up. For the second time Naruto sighed heavily. He started to fidget with his necklace again. For a while he couldn't figure out what it was about it, but he felt that this piece of jewelry was important to him. He showed it to Hinata when they had sessions, but she merely said it was just a necklace as far as she knew. So that got him nowhere. In fact, to him, Hinata's sessions didn't really get him anywhere. Well, when it came to remembering anyway. Of course those sessions helped him feel better and more comfortable, but it didn't help him remember exactly. He had also told her about how he'd dream his memories, or at least what he thought were his memories. And he couldn't help but keep talking about the black-haired man. That guy seemed to be in his memories a lot. Naruto felt that he was the key to everything, that he had to find him. But Hinata told him to write down everything he dreamed about in a notebook. So he did, and he constantly found himself looking into that notebook. He needed more than just sessions in this notebook though. He knew exactly what he needed. He needed to get out there and find answers for himself. Walking around and going to shops weren't enough. He needed to figure out where he lived, where his hangout spots were. He needed to find his friends and family. Again Naruto sighed. After sitting there and thinking for 5 more minutes, he got up and left his flat. Walking across the hall he stepped up to Hinata's door. He often went over to Hinata's flat and hung out. He liked it there better than his own. It was more at home. Maybe it was because Hinata lived in there. There was no maybe, it was definitely because she lived in there. He liked laying on her couch and taking in its scent. It smelled like lavender. Hinata smelled like lavender. He learned to love the smell. He learned to love a lot of things Hinata liked. But some things he couldn't learn to love, like asparagus. He didn't know why she ate it, it was disgusting. He told her that too. But she just laughed, ate it slowly like she enjoyed it. Even when she did that he really liked her. In fact, it was hard not to like her. Hinata was amazing, and found himself constantly making excuses to stay with her anytime he could. With that little thought he walked inside. She was cooking. He could tell because of the warm air and the strong smell of food. It had to be something good. He took a big whiff of the air and closed his eyes. He learned if he concentrated enough, with one sniff he could tell what something was. He sniffed twice, and confirmed she was making waffles. Waffles. He thought happily, opening his eyes. Another thing he learned was that Hinata was an amazing cook, and when I say amazing that's an understatement. Naruto thought. Her cooking was so good that she should have been a chef and not a psychologist. He said she would make more money with her cooking. But she just blushed and laughed at that too. He liked Hinata's laugh, it was sweet and soft and so kind. Like her voice. He shook his head to stop thinking about that stuff. Seriously, it was getting weird. Sometimes he found himself thinking about Hinata so much he would go into this daze or just stare at her. It was so weird, why would he be doing that? He hoped that was just part of being good friends. With that thought he shook his head and began to walk around the living room. He glanced around the room. Sometimes Hinata left some information papers about him in her living room. He knew she was looking for things such as his previous home, or friends, maybe even his old job. But to be honest, she hadn't really found anything on him. Though one day when he asked her about something her eyes seemed to light up, and she told him that maybe she could find something on him. Naruto's eyes stopped on a picture. It was picture of Hinata with a guy. He remembered this photo. It was the photo that he asked Hinata about that made her say she might find something on him after all. He remembered it like yesterday. Wait, it was yesterday. Flashback. Naruto and Hinata had just finished a session. To him it helped him feel better and be more aware of his surroundings. Though of course he didn't really remember anything. That bothered him, but he knew these sessions weren't really for gaining memories but to help him move on from his state of, well, feeling lost and hopeless. But Naruto seriously didn't feel like he needed these sessions to feel better, just being with Hinata made him feel better. I'm going to go take that cake out of the oven now. Hinata told Naruto as she stood up. Sometimes Naruto felt like she purposely cooked those wonderful meals just for him. He smiled and stood up as well. I'll help. Naruto liked to help Hinata in any way he could. After all, she did the same for him. Hinata only smiled back, which meant, okay, and walked out of the room and into her flat. Naruto followed her behind into her nicely decorated living room. He couldn't help but glance around every time he walked in there. Then his eyes fell upon that photo. He didn't know why, but that photo bothered him. It was a picture of Hinata standing next to this guy with his arms wrapped around her shoulders. The guy was very good looking too. He had long brown hair and eyes like Hinata's, except it was a different shade. The more and more he looked at that photo, it just really bothered him. He didn't know what type of bother either. He was uncomfortable about how the man had his arms around Hinata. But he also couldn't help but look at that tattoo on the man's hand. The tattoo was that of a red swirl. Author's note: the tattoo is the Uzumaki symbol. You know, it's on the uniforms in the anime manga. He had that exact same tattoo on his upper arm. He frowned at the photo and finally, after days of wondering, he questioned about the photo. Hinata. She turned and looked at him, then to the photo. Who is this guy? Hinata walked over and picked up the photo, holding it ever so gently. He must have been important to her. A sad smile crept on her face. His name is Neji. He was my cousin. Naruto nodded. He didn't know why, but he felt relieved. He wasn't anything more than just a cousin. Was that a bad thing? Oh cool, where is he now? Hinata was quiet for a minute. He's dead. Now Naruto was quiet. What was he supposed to say to that? He kind of felt like a jerk now. Oh, sorry. Quote. Hinata shook her head. He lost his memories like you. He was one of my patients. Naruto was quiet as he listened to her. I tried to help him, and I thought I did once he got his memories back. But he changed. Her eyes were now watering. And the police found him dead. He killed himself. Naruto was absolutely quiet and frozen. He didn't know what to think. Was that going to happen to him? As if she read his mind, she answered his question. But, I won't let that happen to you, I promise. She looked at him with her eyes filled with unshed tears. But she had that look of determination. And Naruto smiled lightly, and he didn't know why he did it. But his body moved on its own. Naruto wrapped his arms around Hinata's small frame and hugged her. And he spoke softly, I know. And he did know. He did know that Hinata would never let that happen to him. He knew that he would never let that happen to him. He listened as Hinata whimpered a little and resisted not to cry. After what seemed like 5 minutes, he let go. She no longer had those tears in her eyes, but she still looked sad. For some reason that pinched his heart, but he tried to rub it off. Hinata, he said kind of awkwardly. He knew this was probably a bad time to ask, but he did it anyway. Neji's tattoo, what does it mean? I have the same one. Hinata looked at him silently. She didn't answer. Naruto furrowed his eyebrows as he looked down at her. Really, I do. Hold on. Naruto pulled his shirt off, revealing his perfectly lean was when Hinata gave a response. She squeaked. Her face completely changed from sad to embarrassed. It was now hot red and her mouth gaped open a bit. Naruto-kun. She stuttered. Naruto only chuckled. She was so enjoying this. He preferred this Hinata than the sad one. It was so much cuter. See. He turned so she could see his tattoo. Hinata calmed down and looked at his tattoo intently. Naruto watched her with a small smile. Yeah, I see. It's a common tattoo, Naruto. Naruto slumped. Aw man. He thought he was getting onto something. Well, another fail. But, maybe. She mumbled under her breath. Naruto looked back at her. A light now shone in her eyes. Maybe I can find something about you. How? Oh, Anyo. She shrugged. Naruto frowned at her, but she wore this innocently looked at. T was concealing whatever she was really up to. Hinata. Why yes. Naruto opened his mouth to ask a questions, but a smell suddenly at his nose. He knew that smell was something burning. He said out loud, "My cake," and she darted off to the kitchen. Flashback over. Naruto yawned and strolled toward the kitchen. And there he saw her. She was holding a big cup of water getting ready to pour it into a pot. A mischievous smile grew on Naruto's face as he snuck up behind the woman. He carefully took silent steps and soon he was just behind her. "Ohio, Hinata," he said loudly. Hinata jumped when she turned around, which resulted with her spilling the water all over Naruto. She gasped when she saw the now wet Naruto in front of her. She opened her mouth to apologize at the same time she tried to resist laughing. But Naruto held up a hand, stopping her. "I deserved that." He smiled toothily. Finally Hinata gave in and laughed at him. And Naruto laughed as well. The mornings always were the best for these two. The laughter died down and Hinata spoke. "I didn't even hear you come in," she said, getting back to finishing the meal. "I'm as sneaky as a ninja." He smiled, wiping water from his face with his sleeve. Hinata turned around with a perfectly set up plate of waffles topped with whipped cream and berries. "Let's eat." Naruto, who was now drooling eagerly, nodded in agreement. Hinata never disappointed him. Naruto was stuffed and satisfied. Yep, breakfast was absolutely delicious. Maybe having amnesia wasn't so bad if he had Hinata by his side. In fact, he was now warm, fed and comfortable. He smiled happily as cuddled up on the couch, her couch. He was very happy, happier than ever. Hinata came into her living room and looked at Naruto with a soft smile. "Well, someone is comfortable," she said teasingly. "Very." Naruto looked at her. "Come and join me." Hinata walked over and took a seat next to Naruto. She blushed pink when Naruto wrapped his arms around her, bringing her closer. But soon a warm smile grew on her face. And she found herself snuggling against him, and Naruto didn't mind, he welcomed it. "This is nice." He sighed happily with closed eyes. He laid his chin on Hinata's head. Burying his nose into her hair, he inhaled her scent. Today she smelled like lilacs. He wondered if it was some type of perfume she wore. Well, it didn't matter, it smelled nice. Though he couldn't help but ask, "Do you put perfume in your hair?" Hinata only giggled softly, and wrapped her arms around Naruto. "No, Naruto-kun. It's just the shampoo," she said, sweetly. "Oh." Naruto chuckled into her hair. Well, now he knew. "What about you? Do you get your shirt sprayed with perfume?" she asked, taking in the smell of his shirt. It was a masculine smell, but it did smell kind of fruity at the same time. Almost like oranges. "You tell me, you do the laundry around here." Hinata giggled again. "I do, don't I?" She sighed a little dazed. Who would have thought that she could be here cuddling with Uzumaki Naruto? Well, they had did it once before, so it was no big deal. Plus, friends could cuddle, right? It was okay. Wait, she was cuddling with Naruto. Hinata was blushing once again, but she didn't let go of him. After what seemed to be an hour of comfortable silence and cuddling, Hinata said something. "I think I might have found out where you used to live," she whispered softly. Naruto let out. He wasn't quite processing what she was saying yet, plus he was half asleep. "Yep, I was thinking we could go today." "Oh, yeah," Naruto mumbled, softly. Hinata gently pulled back, which caused Naruto to look at her quizzically with his eyes half closed. "Are you listening to what I'm saying?" "Of course I am." Naruto nodded, becoming more awake. "Then what did I say?" "You said you might have found where I used to live." He recited perfectly. "That wasn't so hard." Wait. Naruto's face went blank as he stared back at her face. Hinata nodded, answering his questions that were running through his head at once. His lips started to slowly curve into a huge grin. "Then what are we waiting for? Let's go check it out." He hopped off the sofa and ran to his flat for his coat. Hinata sighed a little sad. She would have just been content cuddling on the couch. Oh well, she hopped up and prepared herself for the trip. Naruto looked up at the beautiful, well-designed apartment building that stood in front of him and Hinata. He shoved his cold hands into his pockets and whistled. There was no way he used to live here, right? Just no way possible. Are you sure this is the right address? He asked Hinata, unsure. Don't get him wrong, it was really nice looking, and it did look extremely familiar and all. But maybe he had passed it by on the street or something. It was just that the idea of him living there seemed strange. I mean, what did he do for a living before all this happened? Hinata looked down at an index card with the address written on it. She nodded softly, yep. This is it. Naruto smiled lightly, well, at least he would get to see the inside. Okay, let's go. He grabbed her by the hand and walked inside. Ah, it was nice and warm inside. He released his hands from his pocket and glanced around. It was really nice in the building, but not too fancy. He liked that. Naruto followed Hinata to the lobby desk where a man was sitting playing a game on his smartphone. He hadn't noticed them, so when Naruto popped the bell he jumped, which made Naruto snicker. The man frowned at the blonde, so Hinata spoke first. Hi, Anyo, we were wondering if we could check out a room. Then we'll leave. Excuse me. The man frowned. There was no way possible that he would let them just look around for their own amusement. Then Naruto spoke, me and my fiancé here are looking for a nice apartment to settle down in. And it didn't hurt that he added a gorgeous smile. He, instinctively, wrapped his arms around Hinata's shoulder. Isn't that right, dear? He asked, sideway glancing at Hinata. Hinata caught on easily, but it was still hard to be, well, Naruto's fiancé. So first she blushed and smiled a little. Anyo, hi, sugar. She said a little louder than needed. Even she knew that was bad. The man looked at them and raised an eyebrow. He was probably wondering if they were really a pair. Though they did look kind of cute together. He smiled. He remembered what young love was like. Now he was in his 30s, which technically speaking wasn't that much older than these two. They looked to be about in their early 20s. Okay, fine. I'll have someone show you around. He left to the back, leaving the two behind. Naruto watched him leave. He didn't say a word until he was out of sight, and once he was, the first words that popped out of his mouth was, sugar. Really? Who says that anymore? He looked at Hinata with teasing smile and a raised eyebrow. He chuckled a little. Police. Hinata huffed, which made Naruto laugh a little more. She rolled her eyes. Who says dear anymore? We're not that far back in time. Naruto stopped laughing, but a hint of a smile was still on his face as he nodded, touché. At that moment the man came back with a woman who held a clipboard. She smiled professionally at the two and shook hands with them. I heard you two are getting married. Naruto once again took the lead. He smiled and wrapped his arm around Hinata's waist, bringing her closer to him. It's true, ever since I saw her fighting that wild crazed dog with those awesome martial arts skills, I knew I wanted to marry her. He said dramatically. Hinata just looked at him the same way the woman did. It was that, okay, look. Hinata couldn't help but think he was enjoying himself too much. He can over-exaggerate a bit. He chuckled nervously with a sheepish smile. Oh, don't be so modest, silly bear. You saved my life. Naruto winked at her. Okay, now he was just saying this to mess with her. Hinata was blushing again, but this time it was more because of embarrassment. The woman smiled widely. That's what I call my spouse. Really? You and me both. Well, my soon-to-be spouse. Naruto returned the smile to the woman. The woman chuckled. I'm Tateyama-chan. She gestured toward the elevator. Now if you follow me I'll show you some apartments. And she began walking. Naruto and Hinata lagged behind. Okay, no more terrible names. She whispered to him. They were just plain embarrassing and ridiculous now. Naruto quietly laughed. Why not, sugar? Hinata again blushed. She really needed to stop overheating at the things he said. She was going to faint one day because of it. So for the first time Hinata told Naruto to shut up, in a polite yet harsh type of way. And he only laughed again. Naruto and Hinata stepped into the elevator with Tateyama-chan, and they began their apartment hunting. As they checked out each apartment, Tateyama-chan apologized if things looked a little messy. They had fired half of the staff for classified reasons. That piqued Naruto and Hinata's interest. And after listening for a while they learned that half of the staff was fired recently. Suspicious or suspicious. After 3 or 4 apartments, Hinata finally tried to get to the exact apartment Naruto used to live in. Tateyama-chan, can we check out the penthouse? Naruto was shocked. He used to live in a penthouse. A penthouse. He even mouthed the words to Hinata, who nodded at him. Okay, could it get any better? I don't know. Tateyama-chan turned around to face them. She wore a complex look. The man who used to live there just moved out. But he still owns the penthouse. Hinata looked at her pleadingly. Oh, please. She asked, sweetly. Naruto nodded, backing up Hinata. Please Tateyama-chan, Hinata has never been in a penthouse before. So if we could just look around. He gave a charming smile. Fine. Tateyama-chan sighed as she gave in. But don't touch anything. Now come along, she said sternly. When she turned around, Naruto and Hinata couldn't resist. They high-fived, and followed Tateyama-chan to the penthouse. The elevator ride made Naruto a little nervous. They were going up pretty. Hinata took his hand in hers to comfort him. And it worked. When they stepped out of the elevator and into the door to penthouse, they were both amazed. Now this was what he was talking about. It was nicely designed. The interior is exactly something he would choose. The place was still so full of space, and the view was amazing just looking from the windows. He wondered what it looked like from the balcony. He ran off to go see, leaving Hinata behind with Tateyama-chan. Somehow he instantly knew where the balcony was, he knew where everything was. And when he stepped onto the balcony, and breathed in the fresh, open and cold air, and saw the view, it all felt so normal for him, so natural. Like he did this every day, and never got tired of it. He walked around the balcony. This was nice. Hey, so you know your way around. Hinata stated, leaning on the rail. She had recently got there. The wind whipped through her hair, blowing it in another direction. Cold and windy, not such a good combination. Yep. He smiled, walking over to her, barely leaving space between them. For some reason the fact that it was all familiar to him saddened him. So, where's Tateyama-chan? Hinata smiled with a mischievous look in her eyes. Let's just say she had to go take care of a little problem. Naruto raised an eyebrow, looking for an answer. I hacked their whole system with my phone. Neji taught me how to do it. Hinata, you are bad. He grinned. I know, so let's hurry and look around. She dragged him back inside. Naruto nodded and they both began searching the apartment. After looking around her rooms, Naruto finally started looking in his bedroom. He looked in the closet, on the bed, under the bed and the drawers. Well, in the drawers he found a stick of gum. He stuck that in his pocket. Just when he thought there was nothing in the room, he heard a creak on the floor where he stepped next to the bed. He stepped in the same spot again, no creak this time. He tapped a different spot of the floor and then the other. The other spot sounded more hollow. Naruto then got to work moving the bed, which for some reason was really heavy. After moving the bed, Hinata came in. She looked at him curiously. And then the spot where the bed was supposed to be. I think I might have found something, he told her before feeling the wooden floor for an opening. Hinata crouched down next to him and handed him a nail filer. This might work better, she told him. Naruto nodded and got to work using the filer. Not even a minute later the nail filer found its way into a crook, so Naruto lifted. And the part of the floor easily lifted up with a little strength. It was a small secret department, had only contained 2 pictures and a file. He pulled the file out first and flipped it open. There was only one sheet of paper that was in it, and it read, Uzumaki Naruto, if you're reading this then you now have accepted and realized Shinobi is corrupted. So come and see me, you know where. Tsunade. There was 2 things this letter confirmed. 1, yes, he did live here. 2, he knew people and they must still be out there. What does this even mean? Hinata frowned as she read the letter herself. I don't know. She sighed. Here, let's move everything back in place. Naruto nodded and closed the department. He took a quick glance at the pictures, and then put them into his pockets. After they moved the bed back, they heard Tateyama-chan's footsteps. What do we do? She's going to get suspicious, Hinata warned Naruto. Naruto was still kind of out of it. His head was wandering elsewhere, but he thought of something quick. Anyo. Here, turn around. She did as he said. And with Naruto's back facing the door, he pulled Hinata close, wrapped his arms around her and kissed the corner of her mouth. Shock was the first thing Hinata felt, but it then morphed into a warm feeling in her chest. Before she could react properly, Tateyama-chan opened the door. From her perspective it looked as if they were kissing. So she gasped and coughed to grab their attention. Naruto turned around and smiled sheepishly, and Hinata just stood there, red face and all. Tateyama-chan nodded curtly, sorry for leaving you. There was trouble with the computers and such. Now, we must leave this apartment. She informed them. Hinata was still in a daze. Why? She asked herself. Why was she acting this way? It wasn't technically a real kiss. Come on, Hinata, Naruto said, which snapped her out of her thoughts. She looked at Naruto, who was smiling down at her. His smile seemed more fake. He was hiding something behind it. She could tell he was unhappy. But why? Well, there was a lot of reasons he could be unhappy, but why now? All of a sudden, yeah, okay. She took his hand he extended. Once they were out of that building, Naruto's smile dropped completely. His face was straight, but she could read all the unhappiness on it. He walked in front of her, in a hurried way. Naruto-kun, she called out to him. Yeah, he slowed down. His voice was concealing what seemed to be anger. Why was he angry? Tell me what's wrong, she said steadily. I just need to blow off some steam, he told her tensely. Then he turned into an alleyway. Hinata followed him. Was he going to kick a garbage can or something? She hoped not. And he didn't. He punched the brick wall with plenty anger. Hinata's chest tight, and as she watched him continue to punch it. Why was he so upset? She snapped out of her train of thoughts when she realized his knuckles were now bleeding. Naruto, stop, she cried, grabbing his fist. He didn't resist her hold. He simply just sighed and moved away from her. Naruto slumped his back against the wall and slid down into a sitting position. What was wrong with him? It's just. He looked up as the snow softly fell from the sky. Why are they not looking for me? Hinata looked at him confused as she crouched down in front of him. Who? Naruto, still looking up, dug into his pocket and pulled out 2 photos. He handed them to Hinata. Hinata looked at what seemed to be the older photo. It was a picture of younger Naruto. He looked so cute as a kid. He was standing in between a blonde handsome man who Naruto resembled, and a red-haired woman. She must have been his mother, he had her face. She then realized these were his parents. She looked at the next photo, it was more recent. Naruto was grinning like a fool as he stood with a black-haired handsome man, who looked about same age as them. There was a man with silver hair and young face, but his mouth and nose was covered by a mask. Then there was a lady. She was older. She had blonde hair and brown eyes with diamond-shaped birthmark on her forehead. These people were Naruto's family and friends, and by telling from the scenery in the background, they were definitely in Konoha. So why weren't they running to his aid, checking up on him? Hinata looked up at Naruto, who was now staring back at her. His eyes were filled with sadness and tears that looked about ready to fall. Never had Hinata ever seen Naruto in a state like this. He was usually so happy and hyper. He was so easygoing and always joking around. Now he was ready to break down and cry. It was heartbreaking. She didn't know what to do for a second. Why aren't they coming for me? He asked Hinata, his voice cracking. He looked at her for answers, but she had none. And it hurt. She shook her head. She wished she had a real answer. She wished she had the truth. Something that would comfort him or put him at ease. But she had nothing. I don't know, she whispered, looking into his face. Finally the tears fell. Hinata's breathing was constricted. She bit her bottom lip as he sniffled and turned his head away. He didn't want her to see him cry. Gomen, he told Hinata. I'll be ready to go home soon. I just need. His voice was breaking all over and he continued to silently cry. He tried to wipe tears away, but more came. It felt like reality finally came to him. Nobody cared about him, they weren't even looking for him. And it was taking forever to get his memories back. Who knows, maybe he probably would never remember fully. Even if he did get his memories back, then what would he do? He was just a mess. I guess no one is coming for me, he said out loud. I don't think anyone really wants to be around me. He remembered how Ayame lied about not knowing him. His head was fuzzy and he wasn't exactly thinking straight. I'm just alone, he gulped, with his shaky voice. He was shocked when Hinata threw her arms around him and held him close. What was she doing? He felt her warmth surround him. Don't you dare. Her voice was shaking. Was she crying too? She pulled back and looked him in the eyes. She was mad. Yes, she looked mad. Don't you dare say that. Her voice was still trembling. Why you know you're not alone. But, why you're not alone, I'm here. And I always will be. She told him firmly. Naruto looked at Hinata shocked, he had never heard her yell before, yet alone at him. But her words were what really affected him. I will never leave you alone, I'll always be here. Even if you don't want me to. Her face softened as she hugged him again. And that's a promise. She whispered. Hinata, arigato. He smiled sadly, wrapping his strong arms around her. What are friends for? Naruto was quiet. She was more than just a friend. Something so much more special, you know Hinata. If I don't get my memories back, I'm okay with that. What? She asked him confused. But only if I get to make new memories with you. And he meant it. Yeah, I did it. Woo, the ending might be a little rushed, but yeah. Anyways, I needed to add something depressing, all the other chapters were a little too happy. So here we are. I will answer some questions such as, why is Ayame lying? In a chapter coming soon. Also yeah, Hinata knew Naruto. It's no secret, I try to hint it. Anyways, I hoped you guys enjoy. Follow, favorite, most of all review. Little Miss Kairi out tilde. Isn't this fitting? Naruto sighed deeply. Once again he was found sitting at the window and looking outside. Today was a gloomy day. The skies were gray and snow heavily fell. It looked as if a blizzard would break out any minute now. There was no going outside today. But that didn't bother him whatsoever. Which was strange for the gregarious Uzumaki Naruto. He was miserable, inside and outside. His body language showed it all. He didn't feel like doing anything right now or later. So the outdoors were fitting, considering how they matched so well at this moment. Naruto rolled out of his seat and plopped onto his bed. Maybe being Mr. Gloom and Doom wasn't so bad. He didn't even have to be other to think about what to do next or anything. Really there was nothing to worry about. All he had to really do was remember why he was sad. Well, let's see. He had broken memories, his previous life seemed like it was erased. And none of his friends or family came, for that seemed about it. Naruto groaned and used his arm to cover his eyes. He could feel they were a little damp. But he wasn't going to cry. No, not like he did in the alleyway in front of Hinata. That was embarrassing. Yes, he was a man, he still had some pride. Oh well, that could be another thing he could sulk about. As Naruto laid in his bed just staring at the ceiling, he had no idea that he was being watched. Yes, by none other than Hinata. She watched him with slightly droopy eyes. She hated to see Naruto like this, it made her feel sad too. She preferred the lively Naruto better than whatever that was laying on the bed. It had been almost a week since he'd been acting like that. He even sulked in her apartment. And to be honest, she was starting to find it kind of annoying. So today she was going to revert him back to his old self. Either he wanted to or not. It was her job to make him feel better after all. Hinata pushed the door open all the way and quietly stepped inside. Naruto didn't even bother to see who it was. He automatically knew it was Hinata. Hey, she said ever so gently. She didn't want to cause any sudden shock or anything. And she didn't. Naruto simply sat up and lazily looked over at her. Hey, he said through a sigh. Hinata shifted her feet from right to left. This was awkward. She completely forget what she was going to say. Anyo. She was able to whisper out. Naruto continued to stare at her. What was going through her mind right now? Well, whatever it was, it didn't matter. So he turned away from her. Do you wanna do something? Hinata finally uttered out. She looked up at him, but his back was now facing her. Her face dropped as she looked him. He was just a pitiful sight. We can just take a break today. That technically wasn't anything new. They had been on a break for a while now. Naruto just hadn't any energy to go out and investigate. Normally she wouldn't make a fuss about it. But this wasn't her. Naruto. No, I don't really feel like it. Naruto answered lowly. He was in his own little daze. Suddenly Hinata felt something hot in her chest, just burning her. Her face twisted into a frown. She was angry. No, she was furious. Why, you may ask. Maybe it was because Uzumaki Naruto moped around for far too long. Not only in his own flat, but hers as well. And he was just being plain rude too now. She was trying to help him, but he just flat out pushed her away. So with this newfound feeling within her, she walked over to Naruto. She was going to put this energy to use. Hinata silently stepped in front of him and slapped her hands on his shoulders. This action surprised the blonde. He looked up at her, shock written all over his face. But he couldn't read Hinata's face. Her bangs were covering it. "Hinata?" he asked, now more confused than shocked. "Naruto-kun," she said very slowly, her voice was faint. She didn't want to yell at him or shake him senseless. She was his doctor, that wouldn't do. She had to do this right. Naruto continued to stare at her. What did she want exactly? "Yes," he answered. "Get over yourself." Hinata looked him straight in the eyes fiercely. Again shock hit Naruto, but it also hit Hinata. She guessed she let her anger bubble over. And strange enough, that overpowering anger was suddenly gone. Naruto blinked. What? His mouth gaped open. Hinata looked at him a little frantically, but she quickly recovered. "What I mean is, it's time that you get over the fact that those people didn't come for you." Naruto's eyes saddened slightly, but he listened to what Hinata had to say. "I know, it hurts. I do. If we just sit around here doing nothing but mope, then we'll never get answers." Hinata spoke strongly with feeling. She started to feel a little better hearing these words herself. "Life goes on, Naruto-kun. And we'll be left behind if we stay like this. That would be like giving up, and I never give up." Those words filled Naruto with a strange warmth. She was right, but it still hurt. He didn't want to just give up, but he didn't know if he was up to it. Arg, why couldn't he just lay here? "Come on, Naruto-kun. Let's just have some fun." She grabbed his hand and intertwined their fingers. Again Hinata was comforting him. He would never be able to thank her enough. She pulled him up, and dragged him out of his room. "See, look, I pulled some fun things out," she said excitedly. Hinata had led them to the living room where board games and toys were laying on the table. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Why did she have toys again? And playing with toys is what she called fun. Hinata. He scrunched his face up a little, but the midnight-haired beauty was too busy sorting through the things on the table. "Look, we have water guns." She smiled warmly at him before she walked over to him and ended up dragging him into the kitchen to fill them up. He would have probably said something about those toys, but by her smile it seemed they held a special place in her heart. It must have, from a good memory. And well, why should he complain? Hinata was only trying to help him, that's all she ever did really. She his friend, his doctor, and his. Nope, she was not his. Love. Anyway, the point was, all he did was mope around and make extra work for her. She just cared about him. He hadn't realized until now that he was being unfair to her. He liked her, a lot. He cared about her, a lot. And what he was doing was technically being mean to her. He had to apologize. Naruto watched her fill one of the water guns up and set it aside. "Hinata," he spoke softly. She didn't look at him, but continued her work at the sink. "I want to say I'm sorry," he said carefully. Hinata suddenly became completely still. "Naruto-kun, you don't have to apologize." "Really?" she replied softly. "But I do. I might have hurt you, and I'm your friend. I should never do anything that might hurt you. It's okay. And no apologies needed. I wasn't hurt. Let's just forget about it and have some fun. No more serious C conversations." Naruto turned her gently to face him. She looked up at him innocently. "I'm sorry, Gabelg." Before he could even finish his words, Hinata shot him straight in the mouth with her water gun. So now he was choking and gagging, but he soon recovered and looked at Hinata. He couldn't believe she just did that. His mouth gaped open as he looked at the toy gun in her hand. "Why, Hinata was resisting the urge to break out into a fit of giggles. "With your mouth open like that. It would be another easy shot." Then she broke out laughing. She couldn't help it, his face was just too funny. Naruto slightly glared at her, his eyes moved around the kitchen. He spotted it, the key to his revenge. In one swift move, Naruto grabbed the water gun and started shooting Hinata in the face. Because of the sudden attack, she was unprepared. She couldn't only scream and try to cover herself. Why continuously sprayed her, he couldn't help but smile triumphantly. Though he stopped once he by accident shoot water up her nose. He didn't stop because he felt bad and she was now gagging and sniffling, but because it was so funny he had to stop to laugh. He laughed, and not just for his own enjoyment but to tease Hinata. He laughed evilly on purpose. And Hinata looked him incredulously. Naruto only laughed harder though. You should see the look on your face, because you look re-gahblg. Again Naruto was shot in the mouth, but this time because he stepped back. He slipped on the water on the floor and fell on his bottom. Naruto shook his head and looked up at the almost soaked woman. Ridiculous. She finished for him. Naruto narrowed his eyes Hinata and they both smirked at the same time. You just waged war with me, Hyuga. Hinata crossed her arms, bring it on, Uzumaki. And with those words the war begun. Naruto quickly stood up and shot Hinata in the face. For some reason that was his favorite place to get her. In result of the face shot she was blinded and stepped back. Taking that time he refilled his gun and stepped back. Hinata, who finally recuperated, looked up at Naruto. She didn't need to refill hers. Unlike Naruto, she didn't waste her water like that. She held up her gun pointed straight towards his chest. Naruto lifted his weapon and pointed straight towards her face. Looks like we got a cowboy standoff here. Hinata had to keep herself from laughing. She knew it was supposed to be serious, but she wasn't really doing this for revenge. Nor was Naruto. They were really just having good fun. So she giggled a little. Hey, no laughing. He sprayed her in the face, catching her off guard again. He continued to do so until she slipped and fell. Naruto walked over to her and looked down at her. He shook his head and kicked away her gun. That wasn't fair. Hinata pouted. He smiled and nodded. Naruto crouched down in front of her. Yes, it was. You didn't take the matter seriously. So I won. How does it feel to be a loser on the floor? He asked teasingly, then laughed at his own statement. I don't know, why don't you join me and find out? Hinata didn't wait for his reply. She grabbed his collar and pulled him down. Naruto slipped too and was brought down next to Hinata. They were quiet, for the first few seconds, and the next they were laughing. Let me help you up. Naruto helped Hinata up along with himself. He was grinning and she was still chuckling a little. He couldn't help but stare at her. Times like this he really just wanted to kiss her. Oh wow, that came out strange. Hinata, who noticed his starring, blushed. At least it wasn't so bad, she was starting to heat up. But she was also super glad. Naruto was happy again. You have no idea how much I missed that smile. She gently stroked his face and brushed away a wet blonde strand of hair. Her touch felt nice and warm. He closed his eyes and leaned into her hand. He had a content smile. His body just felt heavy, tired and relaxed. But only if I get to make new memories with you. He didn't know why, but those words he said just popped into his head. He really did mean those words. He just felt everything was okay as long as he had Hinata. As cliché as it sounded, but he really did feel that way. Naruto, you're cold. Hinata's words abrupt his thoughts. She snapped his eyes open. She looked down at him with tender eyes. He suddenly felt a bit awkward and embarrassed. Let's change our clothes. Hi. Naruto turned on one foot and walked off. He didn't think she noticed, but Hinata did. He was blushing. And it was cute. Hinata smiled and went off to change herself. When Hinata stepped back into his living room, he was already sitting on the couch in a fresh pair of clothes. She blinked. He was really cheered up, wasn't he? She walked over and sat down beside him. Naruto grinned at her, almost like he was smirking. He looked almost excited. He was just radiating. So, what's the next challenge? Hinata blinked once again. Challenge? She asked, tilting her head sideways. Naruto nodded as if it was obvious. Hinata really didn't get it. I won the last one. With the water gun battle. Hinata, finally starting to understand, shrugged. She really didn't know. There was a lot of things they could do. Anything at all. Strip poker. Naruto said. Hinata was seriously tempted to smack his head. Naruto seemed to notice and laughed. I'm kidding, Hinata. He laughed. You're not ready for this. He gestured to his body with one sweep of his hand. She blushed furiously and rolled her eyes. I'm afraid it's the other way around. She smiled innocently. Naruto scoffed and chuckled. Girl, please. My voice is hard for you to take, let alone my bod. Hinata couldn't help to laugh now. She was still red. But Naruto seemed serious about his words, which made it comical. She covered her face for a minute before replying. Prove that your voice is oh so good. That caught Naruto off guard. He looked at her quizzically. And she answered by going through her things on the table. It clicked when he saw the karaoke machine. It wasn't hooked up to the television, and looked as if it needed a CD to put it. Okay. He smiled and helped her set it up. After they finished, she showed him the box of CDs. Choose your song. She smiled confidently at him. Naruto looked through his options. None of them seemed to catch his interest. He pursed his lips, then he saw the disc. La Da Dee by Cody Simpson. It sounded weird, but when he saw it, it just seemed familiar. His chest warmed and pulled it out. The blonde looked at the cover back and front. This one, he said slowly and barely louder than a whisper. Hinata stared at him for a while. He didn't realize this though. That one? She asked unsure. Naruto nodded, and smiled. Yep, you're going to be weeping when I get done. Hinata looked at him hesitantly, then she smiled. Try and make me tear up. It won't work. Naruto smirked at the new challenge and popped the CD in. He grasped the mic in his hand. He was strangely eager to hear the music play. And when it did, he felt kind of bizarre. If it made any sense. He didn't really have to look at the screen to sing. The lyrics were already in his head. And each word felt funny in his mouth. He had sung them before. Since he was too busy singing and enjoying the music, he hadn't noticed Hinata. She just kept starring. She felt feeling rushing to her as well. He sung this song before. That one night, she closed her eyes to remember it. And like as if time just fly by. The song was over. Naruto made sure to add his big finish, and Hinata smiled and clapped vigorously. Bravo, bravo. He smiled and bowed. She was about to say something else. Something that would reveal some of her secret. But there was a beep. Somebody came to visit Naruto, or more like Hinata, since both flats were hers. They both frowned. Who in the world could that possibly be? Hinata went off to answer it. And Naruto followed behind to listen in. Hey, he was curious. Hello, this Hyuga Hinata. And who is this? She asked, a little more suspicious than curious. The voice was hesitant, but when the person answered, Naruto and Hinata was more shocked than anything else. The owner of the voice seemed to be in a hurry. It's Ayame, from Ichiraku. It was Hinata and Naruto's turn to take a while to answer. They both stared at each other before replying, oh, yes. What are you doing here? They asked at the same time. I came to return some things of yours. You forgot one of your cards at Ichiraku. Hinata frowned. She didn't remember doing such things. And if she did, why did they come now all of a sudden? And how did they found out where she lived? She had to think of the possibilities. I'll be right back. I'm going to check my wallet. She whispered to Naruto and walked out to her own living quarters. Naruto stood there for a second. Was he to talk to Ayame? He didn't know. HMPH. He decided, he was going to talk to her. But outside, he put on his coat and left the building. There she was standing outside. She seemed nervous and jittery. Naruto walked over and she noticed him. To his surprise, she ran over to him and dragged him to the side of the building. He opened his mouth to question her, but she stopped too and looked around. And then she began pouring a mouthful of information into his ear. Her voice was low as she spoke. Listen, I'm sorry about lying at the restaurant. But I had no choice. We and my dad work a little with Shinobi too. A lot of the soldiers eat there. So they could hear and see what was going on. They threatened my dad and I. They said they would take our restaurant away and our lives. You have to find Tsunade. But to find her, find Kakashi. Listen, here's his coordinates. I can't give you an exact address. I'm sorry, really, I really am. I hope one day you'll understand FD and forgive me and dad. She spoke so fast. But Naruto understand. And just like that she ran off. Wait, come back. He yelled her, but she was out of there in no time. Point 7 He has so many questions. And she had answers. She knew about that Tsunade person. And who was Kakashi? Suddenly he remembered the masked man with the silver hair in the photo. That must have been him. Having enough of the cold weather, he went back inside. Hinata was waiting for him with her credit cards in her hands. Ayame left. Where were you? Naruto wanted to tell her everything. That they could continue to investigate. But right now they had a day off. Nowhere. Let's finish the challenge, he said, taking off his coat. Hinata just stared at him, but smiled. Sure, okay, I'll just put these back up, she said, referring to the cards. She walked off back to her flat again. She couldn't help but wonder. What happened outside? Did Ayame confess the truth? She had already knew Ayame was lying about the cards. She just wanted to leave her and Naruto alone. Hinata was already in her bedroom and opening her drawer. She was too lazy to actually put the cards back in her wallet. When she dumped them in the drawer, she saw that old photo. She couldn't reset but pick it up and stare a little. As she looked at the photo, she just asked herself, "What am I doing?" She sighed. She asked herself that whenever she woke up knowing Naruto was in her apartment building. "Hinata, hurry up," she heard Naruto yelling. Goodness, he was going to get them in trouble with the neighbors. She chuckled, but that was Naruto. She put the photo back up and left her room. That night Naruto's flat was filled with laughter, joy, and if I must say so, terrible singing. But laying in Hinata's drawer was a photo. A photo that contained her little secret she kept from. That if he saw the photo that he would question everything about their relationship. That photo was a photo of Hinata and Naruto, a few months before his accident. He was bound to see it sooner or later. Little did she know, he would see it sooner. Uzumaki Naruto had no idea that after their little break they would start off rough. It was actually a little more than annoying. The very next day Naruto had told his doctor about what happened with Ayame. Then they got to work, starting off with the coordinates she gave them. As Naruto waited impatiently, he paced around Hinata's office non-stop. He was a bit irritated, clearly. They had been working on finding the location of this Kakashi for a while now. In fact 2 hours to be more precise. And each second he waited for the stupid coordinates to be encrypted annoyed him even further. With the sound of Hinata's typing, the clicking of the mouse and the ticking of the clock. Why, he just couldn't stand it. All he had to do was wait. While she did all the work. Maybe that's what annoyed him more than anything else. The fact that Hinata did everything, while he sat back and waited. It just got to him more than ever at times like this. Especially when she was the one always bringing him up when he was down. She just did all the work and he couldn't stand it. He wanted to do something more than ever now. Not only for her, but for himself. He felt helpless. And he hated that feeling. Suddenly the noise of Hinata typing stopped, which made Naruto turn to her. Had she finally found something? His question was answered in one word. Nothing. Hinata said, her voice mixed with disappointment and exhaustion. Naruto groaned, aggravated. All this time spent on nothing. Completely nothing. Hinata smiled a little, maybe to cheer him up a little. Naruto-kun, these coordinates aren't like normal coordinates. It looks more like a code. She said slowly as she looked over the slip of paper that held the information. It was true. It in fact did look more like a code than coordinates. It was filled with numbers, letters, and other characters you'd find on a keyboard. It made no sense no matter how they tried to figure it out. So sadly Naruto had to agree, but he didn't have to give up. Nope, never, nada, that wasn't an option. Maybe, you're typing it in wrong. The blonde replied, knowing full well he was wrong. Hinata frowned slightly at his reply. Seriously, Naruto, I have been sitting at this computer for 2 hours. I didn't type it in wrong. Sorry. He sighed heavily. Hinata softened her gaze. It's okay, we'll figure something out. She grabbed his hand once again, comforting him. Naruto smiled lightly at her and squeezed her hand. He was glad to have her by his side. Even if he was just holding her soft, small, warm hand. She was always comforting. Though Naruto couldn't help but feel something was off whenever they did stuff like this. Either it was hugging, or just holding hands. It was weird. Not a bad weird. A nice weird, but just not normal. He couldn't explain it. It was just that whenever they did that, it didn't seem like something friends would do. More like a couple. But he never could think of Hinata that way. Seriously, that would be weird to want to date your very special friend, right? It wasn't just weird, but it'd be awkward, right? Oh Kami, he didn't know anymore. With that weird thought going through his mind, he unconsciously let go of her hand. The midnight-haired woman didn't seem to mind, she simply preoccupied that hand with holding a glass of water. Naruto rubbed his eyes. Well, what now? What were they to do? They obviously couldn't go back to his old apartment. They wouldn't be allowed back into the penthouse. They couldn't go back to Ichiraku and question Ayame. Getting her in trouble would be terrible, he wanted her to be alive. So when he remembered they could have a decent conversation. So, what were they to do? Naruto pursed his lips and looked at Hinata. She was simply drinking her glass of water. Again, Naruto thought about how she worked so hard and how much she meant to him. He couldn't never thank her enough. Hinata. She couldn't actually speak considering her mouth was full. So she just nodded at him as she set down her cup. Naruto grinned brightly at her and said triumphantly, "I love you." Hinata's reaction was not what he was expecting. First water squirted out of her nose and she spilled her water over her desk. Now the first thing Naruto thought was, that isn't so attractive or a nice response. She didn't even have time to think of how to reply. The woman stood up wiping her nose with her sleeve and looking at her desk in panic. "Ah, Naruto, quick, go get some old newspaper out of the closet," she demanded before desperately trying to save her keyboard and mouse. Naruto quickly turned to find the old newspaper in her closet. He looked through the closet in a hurry. He moved a box on the shelf and a photo fell. He picked up the frame and looked at it. It was a photo of a 12-year-old Hinata in a figure skating dress while on the ice. Ah, she looked so cute. Naruto grinned at the photo before calling back to her. "Hinata, you never told me you were a figure skater." He chuckled a little. "And Naruto focus," she yelled back sounding busy. Naruto frowned and nodded. Right. The newspaper. Ah, there it was. Naruto pulled the newspaper down and brought it to Hinata. Without hesitation she snatched half of the stack and used it to soak up the water. He sighed relieved that no real damage was done. And all of this just because he told her how he felt. He was insulted and maybe even a little hurt. Did she not like him all that much? Or maybe she got it the wrong way. He should clear that up then if she did. He didn't want to take any chances. He cleared his throat. "When I said I loved you I meant I loved you as a friend," he said timidly. He honest didn't know why he felt so awkward about it. And when he listened to Hinata laugh, he felt a little more awkward. "Why yeah, I knew that," she responded making a hand gesture as if it was obvious. "Because it'd be weird if I actually did love you like that," he added on. Why? He didn't know, his mouth wouldn't stay shut. It would. Hinata mumbled to herself. She didn't know, but he heard. Which made him raise an eyebrow. So Hinata chuckled nervously again. "I mean of course it would. Me and you and your whiskered face. Silly." Naruto puckered his lips and narrowed his eyes. "What's wrong with my whiskers?" he asked with a deep voice. He was obviously putting on a comical act. So Hinata laughed. "Nothing." She walked toward him and stroked his cheek. "They're perfect. Just like you." Her soft words made him blush. She could make him blush more than ever now. Even the simplest things she said just made him gush and blush. And make him feel embarrassed, but no matter how much she could make him feel that way, he could make her feel it too. Just more often than she did him. "Don't forget yourself," he told her through a small whisper. And there it was, her feverish face. He was content now. The color left his cheeks as he smiled at her. At this moment he really wanted to say it again. "I love you." Those words just expressed how he felt. Of course he meant it as a friend. Suddenly Naruto came to a realization. Their faces was only centimeters apart. He remembered when they were back at the penthouse. How he kissed her. Well, he didn't technically kiss her. He was like a centimeter or two away from her lips. Yeah. Then the impact of that moment hit him. Back then he was really too angry and depressed to care or understand what he did. But now he fully understood what he had done. It had felt good. Good, yes. If good included excitement, fear, elation, and eagerness. His eyes looked from left to right before they locked on Hinata's lavender eyes. "Sue," he said slowly. "We're pretty close. And quiet. Are we gonna kiss again or something?" Hinata's face changed colors. She was flushed. And she didn't hesitate to pull back in her embarrassed state. Naruto laughed a little. It never got old. To make her act like that, to make her blush. It just sent flutters up his stomach to his chest. It made him feel nice. His eyes lowered to his hands which were still holding the stack of newspaper. Naruto didn't really care to actually read the news nor watch it honestly, but in his state he would watch and read it. He needed to catch up with the world. Though he wouldn't read this, it was old newspaper. So he just scanned his eyes over it out of curiosity, and he was about to set it down when his eyes caught a familiar face. It wasn't someone in his past, it was someone he met when he woke up. "That's my nurse," he exclaimed with a mix of shock and excitement. "Oh, The feeling of knowing and remembering it was such a sweet, sweet, sweet thing. You never really appreciate it until you lose it. Hinata looked at him confused, her face wasn't as red anymore. What do you mean? She asked, coming over to look. She was the first person I talked to when I woke up. The nurse that I actually liked. He told her, showing Hinata the article. Hinata looked at the article and the picture above it. The confusion soon left her face without a trace, it was as if everything was clear. She had that knowing look. That's my patient, she said softly with her expression twisting into a solemn one. What do you mean? Naruto frowned now the confused one. What was she talking about? Hinata sighed heavily. She was once my patient, she continued, the woman was going through a saddening departure. Naruto nodded, now starting to understand. But what is she doing in the newspaper? He asked Hinata expecting an answer. She obviously knew. Why don't you read and find out? Naruto smiled sheepishly, she was right. He began reading the article with a frown. It was saying something about her boyfriend going missing and blah blah blah. Naruto sighed and flipped the page. His eyes stopped on the next picture and what it revealed. The article meant much more to him now. There he was, that man. His dark hair, eyes and handsome face. It was all there, and thanks to the article he knew his name. It was Uchiha Sasuke. It's him. Hinata didn't even have to ask. She knew exactly who he was talking about. It was that man that always came up in their sessions. That guy was in Naruto's memories from childhood to manhood. And now he was in the newspaper. Not only that, that man was her other patient's boyfriend. She stared at Naruto and bit her bottom, this was still a dead end. And it was also a bad idea, for the guy was missing, she wanted to tell Naruto this. Naruto-kun, we need to find her. Naruto looked up at Hinata with that determined look of his. He was pointing to the picture of her. We need to talk to Haruno Sakura. Hinata was quiet on the way to Sakura's house. She was afraid the girl might say something about, well, her and Naruto. She might trigger something, and what if? She looked at Naruto who was looking out the cab window. His face was serious and determined. There was no stopping him. She guessed she would have to say something to Sakura before Naruto. That would really be the only solution. Seto, do you have kids? Naruto asked the cab driver before smiling. For some reason Naruto had a habit of talking to this cab driver like a friend. To be honest, it was a coincidence that they got a ride from him. He was just driving down the street when Naruto spotted him. At first it looked as if he was trying to get away. But some cars locked him in. So he had reluctantly let them in. Seto sighed through his clenched teeth. He really had a dislike for Naruto. Well, not only the blonde, there was other customers that were stupid. Why did he still have this job again? Kami, someone remind him. No, I don't. Why do you ask? He answered Naruto in his annoyed voice. That didn't faze Naruto. He just thought Seto was one of those grump type of people. You look kind of old. He shrugged, innocently. Seto groaned and shook his head. He was only in his late 20s. Did he really look that old? He happened to think he looked young and fresh. And Naruto looked stupid and, well, stupid. Hinata gasped at Naruto, Naruto-kun, that's not very nice. She scolded him and folded her arms. Seto didn't even look that old, but he did look as if he should have a kid or two. Though she wasn't going to say that out loud. Excuse me for speaking my mind. Naruto laughed a little and leaned his chin onto his knuckles. He started to look out the window again. Hinata looked at him, he seemed content. He was content. We're here, Seto announced, and parked the car on the curb. They were parked outside of a nice small house. Naruto stepped out of the car and tilted his head slightly. He thought she lived in an apartment. Are you sure? Naruto asked Seto. He was doubting this was the right place. But Seto only scoffed, and before he could give a sarcastic reply, Hinata grabbed Naruto's hand. We're here. She's staying at her parents' house. Hinata told Naruto. He trusted her. After all, Sakura was Hinata's patient, she should know what happens with her patient. He even saw Hinata check the files. Honestly, he would trust Hinata even she had no real proof to show him. Naruto smiled at her softly and lightly squeezed her hand. Hinata shyly smiled at him with rosy cheeks, but almost broke away from him when she heard Seto suddenly talk. I think I'm gonna puke. He shook his head at the two. Hinata felt a little embarrassed, so she tried to pull her hand away, but Naruto tightened his grip on it. She was surprised. Don't you have a job to attend to? Naruto mocked Seto before sticking his tongue out at the driver. How immature, but to Hinata it looked cute. Seto sighed and drove off, leaving Naruto and Hinata in front of the house. The two stepped up to the front porch and before they made it to the door a man came out. He had dark hair and eyes. Just like Sasuke, Naruto couldn't help but stare. And strange enough the guy stared right back at him. Hinata blinked at the two unsure of what was happening. The man looked as if he was progressing toward Naruto until he saw Hinata. Then he left. Just like that, he was gone. Naruto knew he saw that man before. He watched the man drive away. Naruto-kun. Hinata glanced at him in concern. Naruto coughed and shook his. Right, they needed to focus. Plus if Sakura was you. P2 it she could tell them who that guy was. Naruto gently knocked on the door and quietly waited. The door slowly opened a little, it was cracked and there was an emerald green eye looking at them. Naruto grinned pleasantly. Hello, I'm Uzumaki Naruto and this is Hyuga Hinata. He gestured to Hinata. Can we talk with a Haruno Sakura? The door opened all the way. And standing there was the nurse. With her short pink hair that rested on her shoulders. Her eyes were dark all around and she looked a little thinner than he last saw her. In fact she looked a lot worse than when he first saw her. He felt something stir in his stomach. Naruto was concerned for her. I'm Sakura. Please come in. She stepped out of the way. Naruto and Hinata entered. Hinata went over to give Sakura a hug almost immediately. Naruto had almost forgot that she was her doctor too. Sakura hugged Hinata back with closed eyes. They talked a little before Sakura led them to the living room to sit down. She only left the room temporarily to grab some snacks. She then returned with a pitcher of lemonade and some cookies. Sakura set them down on the coffee table before sitting on the couch across from them. So, Naruto, how are you doing? She asked, kindly. I'm fine, he replied before grabbing a cookie. These cookies were good. Nice cookies. He nodded at her before taking another bite. He didn't seem to notice the tense atmosphere. Sakura smiled at him softly, you're still the same. Just as how Sasuke described you. She shook her head. At the mention of his name Naruto stopped stuffing his face. Oh yeah, he said slowly. She nodded and poured them all a cup of lemonade. Yep, I know you're here to ask about him. She grabbed her cup and sipped her drink. Naruto didn't dare grab his own cup now. He wasn't hungry or thirsty. He just wanted to hear about his missing friend. He opened up his mouth to ask about him, but Hinata spoke first. If it isn't too difficult to talk about for you. Hinata said tenderly. She didn't want to hurt Sakura in any way. The woman was already going through a lot. It's okay, Naruto wants to hear about him. Sakura told Hinata and turned her head back to him. What do you want to hear? Naruto was silent. Honestly he didn't know what to ask now that he was here, Anyo. He really didn't know what to say. He looked down and slowly bit his cookie in hand. Tell me whatever you want about him. He shrugged. Sakura laughed a little. Well, he was a jerk. She said shaking her head. Naruto found himself laughing easily too. Yeah, he was. Wasn't he? He felt that he knew. Sasuke even if couldn't remember him fully. He could also be a sweetheart too. Sakura smiled softly as she thought about him. And I loved him. By her tender and affectionate tone, Naruto could even tell that she really loved Sasuke back then and even now. Naruto remained quiet and so was Sakura before she set her cup down and began talking. And it's quite sad that I was the one that ended our relationship. She sighed sadly. I guess I was so mad because he would disappear for a while saying it was part of his job. Of course I didn't believe him. And we started arguing a lot. Until that one night. I ended it. That night a lot of terrible things flew from my mouth. And I regret it all. If I knew that it was going to be the last time. No, I mean if I knew that it was going to be a while before I'd see him again. I would have changed everything I said. She took in a deep breath. She seriously didn't need to cry. She had cried too much for the past few months he'd been missing. And he left. He said he'd be back for his stuff and in the meanwhile he'd stay with you, Naruto. But he never answered my calls and he never called and he was just gone. He was missing. So when I told police this they just thought I was some stalker ex-girlfriend. They just thought he ran away and soon they stopped searching thinking he was just gone. Sakura shook her head vigorously. But he's not gone, he's out there somewhere. I tried calling you but you were gone too. She felt that lump in her throat and so she blinked away the upcoming tears. I don't want to believe that he's really gone. It's not like Sasuke to run away. And I know he didn't die. Her sight was now blurred by tears. Big drooping tears. They ran down her face silently. I just can't believe he's dead, that would be like giving up on him. She said through a choke. It hurt, it just hurt too much for her to bear. She hated crying, that's all she could do. Cry and nothing for Sasuke. Hinata sighed lightly. She knew something like this would happen. It was such a delicate subject for Sakura. Here she was crying like she did through all their sessions. Hinata came over and hugged the girl in attempt to give her comfort. All Naruto could do was watch her break down. It was such a heart-breaking scene. He felt her pain, his chest was tightening at just this. Not the pleasant chest tightening, but the painful one. He wanted to comfort her too. But what could he possibly do? This woman really loved Sasuke. And now he was gone to wherever he was. His mouth wouldn't open to say anything, it was just in a straight line as he watched her cry. It finally opened his mouth, but it opened on its own. He was going to say something to her, something Sasuke said. Sakura looked up at Naruto confused with big wet tears staining her face. They were started to stop. What was he going to say? He was going to say something. Suddenly Sasuke's voice played in his head. It kept saying the same thing over and over again. And each time it was cut off. Call her for me, tell her I'm sorry, and he got it now. He remembered that memory, he dreamed it in the hospital. He now knew who Sasuke asked him to call. He wanted me to tell you he was sorry, and… Quote. Sakura looked up at him expectantly. What was Sasuke going to say after that? Naruto looked at Hinata who looked back at him with gentle eyes. And, he wanted me to tell you that, he loves you. Even though he was saying this to Sakura, he stared right at Hinata. The pinkette bit her bottom lip to hold back her tears. Thank you, Naruto. Thank you so much. Naruto now understood why she questioned him like that back at the hospital. She just wanted to know where Sasuke was. And maybe that's why he felt a connection to her. He smiled sadly at her. But watching her cry like that hurt him, and knowing that she was going through all this pain made him angry. He hated the people that took Sasuke away from her, and he hated the people that took away his memories. And just like Sakura, he refused to believe Sasuke was dead. He had to believe he was alive. Naruto stood up and looked down at Sakura with focused yet determined eyes. Haruno Sakura. She looked up at him with a little look of confusion again. I know it hurts. But I promise you, your pain will go away soon. Hinata also looked up at his serious face. What was he talking about? I'll bring Sasuke back to you, he exclaimed, looking at her. And that's a promise of a lifetime. Believe it. He grinned brightly and gave her a thumbs up. His smile seemed to brighten up the room. And they were all quiet while Naruto still stayed in his pose. His thumb was starting to shake a little. Finally Sakura bursted into tears, big fat ones rolled down her. That wasn't supposed to be her reaction. Oh, Naruto's surprised Sakura jumped up and wrapped her arms up around him. Thank you, thank you, thank you. She repeated over and over again. Naruto was hesitant to hug her back, but slowly did after Hinata beckoned him onto from behind. And when he hugged her, it was different from him and Hinata's hugs. It was warm and friendly. He felt something like a strong bond. Of course it didn't make him feel as good as he did with Hinata. But he felt happy knowing he could do something for this girl. Because without knowing it, his and he love for Sasuke made them friends. XOXOXOXOXOXOXOXOXOXOXOX. Later and they decided to leave instead of bothering Sakura anymore. She needed her rest and they were both concerned for her, quite frankly. As they stepped out the door, Naruto remembered that man. Oh, Sakura-chan. Who was that guy that was here before us? Sakura tilted her head. What guy? She blinked. Oh, you mean Itachi. He's Sasuke's brother. He comes to visit me and make sure I'm alright every now and then. She smiled while looking at her own feet. Everybody's been really concerned about me lately. But they don't need to worry anymore, I'll get better. Because I know Sasuke will be back. The weight of that promise finally set down on Naruto. Oh yeah, no worries. Believe it. He chuckled nervously, hoping Sakura wouldn't see through him. But Hinata saw it all. She giggled a little as Naruto turned around and walked over to the sidewalk. So he doesn't know? Sakura asked as soon as he was out of earshot. Hinata didn't need to ask, she already knew what Sora was talking about. No, he doesn't need to know. It was only really one night anyway. If it was only one night, then why don't you tell him? Tell him about you guys. She frowned sadly at Hinata. But the midnight-haired woman didn't answer, she just walked away. Just make sure you tell him and he doesn't figure out on his own. Sakura whispered to Hinata. Hinata didn't reply or turn around, she just kept walking. Naruto glanced at her curiously. He could tell something was wrong. What's the matter? He asked, laying his hands on his head and letting his elbow poke out to the side. Nothing. She shook her head. She remembered that night. It was so depressing at first because of her breakup, but then he was there like a. Her thoughts went elsewhere. Naruto. I know who can find out the coordinates. She exclaimed excitedly. Naruto, who was now just as excited as her, grinned. Really? Who? He asked joyously. Hinata's adorable face grinned as well. My ex-boyfriend. She said, pumped up. Naruto's grin slowly dropped. Say what? He asked shortly. At that moment Naruto finally rediscovered what the feeling jealousy was and how it felt. He did not like this, he did not like this one bit. He was alone, swinging on a swing all by himself. There was no one to push him anymore. He was sad, more than sad. He was miserable. There was no one to make him laugh at silly faces. No one to help him with his homework. No one to kiss him goodnight. No one to help him ride his bike. And there was so much no one would do for him anymore. He was all on his own. A tear rolled down his cheek. Then another and another, until he was crying. He tried to wipe his tears away but more came. Why did you have to go? He sobbed his little blue eyes out. Why did you leave me behind? He continued to talk to himself in his helpless cries. Uzumaki. A voice called out to him. He recognized that voice, it sounded familiar. At the same time different. He found himself quickly wiping away his tears and hopped off the swing. And there came a little boy. It was Sasuke. But he was a child, maybe about 8. Ah, so it was another childhood memory. Sasuke crossed his arms before he spoke to him. Were you crying? He asked, or more like demanded an answer. His dark eyes looked serious. Naruto turned his head. Yeah, right. Crying is for babies, he announced, not wanting to admit it. He had been crying heavily. Sasuke rolled his eyes. You were obviously crying. The boy shook his head at the blonde. But the Uzumaki refused to admit it. He kept his head looking away. Sasuke sighed as his face softened. I cry too sometimes, he told Naruto in a surprisingly soft tone. Naruto was shocked to hear this. His child self had always saw Sasuke as the tough kid who was perfect. He didn't want to sympathize Sasuke. So what? Why are you telling me this? He frowned. Because we're both going through the same thing, Baka. Sasuke said, now frowning himself. They took your family and they took mine as well. Naruto looked at Sasuke sadly and plopped back on the seat. He knew it was true. Yeah, so what? He repeated again and swung his legs. Sasuke sat beside him on another swing. Naruto, have you heard of shinobi? He asked him, swinging slowly. Naruto watched how Sasuke swung and followed the same movements. As he swung at the same pace as Sasuke, he thought about the question. I think, yeah, my parents worked for a shinobi. Naruto nodded. But I'm not quite sure what it is. He replied sheepishly. The black-haired child rolled his eyes. You are hopeless. Shinobi is a secret organization for our country. They're like spies that do special missions, most of the time they do it undercover. Naruto listened quite fascinated. He bet Sasuke knew everything, and that made him a little jealous. And the elite spies are called ninjas because they're that good. Whoa, ninjas. Was my mama and papa a ninja? Naruto asked, more excited than ever. He had no idea that his parents had such a cool job. Sasuke shrugged. I don't know, but my dad was. You see, half of the time shinobi agents come from great families. Like the Uchihas or Hyugas. Sometimes people who work for shinobi aren't spies, they get minor jobs. And, hold on, Naruto interrupted his Uchiha friend. Was my parents ninjas or not? He crossed his arms. He was determined to know, he really didn't care about that other crap. Sasuke groaned, did they have a red swirl thingy tattoo? He asked, irritated with Naruto. But the only way to get him to listen was if he satisfied him. Naruto nodded slowly, yeah, my dad did on his shoulder. And my mom had one on her hand. He cupped his chin. What this have to do with them being ninjas? Sasuke's face lit up a little, I can't believe the parents of a dimwit are ninjas. He muttered underneath his breath. Well, the ninjas have that special tattoo that shows their rank. So your parents were ninjas. Naruto pumped his fist in the air in his happiness, booyah. He giggled happily. Sasuke simply rolled his eyes at Naruto. Anyways, shinobi do get some of their recruits from great families. But they also get their recruits from orphans. Sasuke said slowly while he looked off into the distance. The blonde watched him carefully. What was he getting at? Sue, he asked, stopping his swinging as Sasuke did. Naruto. Sasuke turned to him, I want to be a ninja. He sounded as determined as ever. Naruto just stared at him. He wanted to be a ninja. Why? That's all he could say. Why would he want to be a ninja? Sure, it was cool, but what would it do for him? Sure, the Uchiha's family were shinobi agents and all. But the Uchihas were gone. There was only Sasuke and Itachi. I want to get back at the people who took my family away from me. Sasuke balled up a fist. And I want to take on my parents' job. Okay, yeah, I get it. But why are you telling me all this? Naruto raised his hands. He didn't get it. Why was Sasuke saying all this to him? Sasuke only rolled his eyes. What? Was it obvious? I want you to join me, duh. He put his fist on his waist. What? Naruto was dumbfounded. Why? I'm not smart and I'm not as skilled as you. And Sasuke cut him off with his own voice. Because spending all this time with you at this dumb foster house made me, kind of don't hate you, you're like a brother. And I don't want to lose you too. Sasuke was blushing now. He was completely embarrassed. Getting those words out was hard enough. Naruto knew what he was saying. Sasuke loved Naruto like a brother. And even though Naruto didn't want to admit it, he felt the same about him. And he didn't want to be left behind again. Naruto chuckled evilly and wiped under his nose with a finger. Oh, Sasuke. Ha ha ha. I guess I'll join you, since you need me and all. Sasuke frowned and sighed, whatever. Naruto held out his pinky finger, let's promise on it. We'll both become ninjas and always be in each other's lives. Sasuke smirked and Naruto grinned, they pinky swore on it. This is just the beginning. Naruto. Beep, beep, beep. Naruto slowly opened his eye as he awoke to the sound of his alarm clock. He rubbed his eyes groggily before he sat up and yawned. He sat there for a minute. Then he realized he had another weak memory. He had to write it down while it was still fresh. He grabbed his journal that was laying on his nightstand and began writing quickly. He wrote down all that he could remember from the dream. In fact, he wrote down a lot for this memory, it revealed some things about shinobi. He finished up his writing and then got ready for his day. He left his flat to quickly go to Hinata's. She was currently setting down breakfast. Naruto knew she got up way earlier than him, but that didn't matter. She looked up and smiled at him. Ohayo, Naruto-kun. She greeted him warmly. Naruto found himself smiling as well, Ohayo. He greeted back and sat at the table. His thoughts were leading elsewhere while he looked at Hinata. She appeared really nice. As if she put an effort into it. Even without putting any effort into her looks, she'd always look beautiful to him. Though he knew she wasn't dressing up nicely for him, but for that guy. Even thinking about him made Naruto sick. He hated him, he hated Hinata's ex-boyfriend before he even met him. All he needed to know was that this guy dated Hinata once. That's all he needed to hate him. He would never like him as long as he lived in this world. Not ever. The Uzumaki coughed to grab the Hyuga's attention, so, anyways Hinata. I had another memory. I wrote it down. He told her and she nodded. And I was thinking. The coordinates can wait. Instead we could talk about the dream I had. Hinata blinked as she stared right at him. He was trying to give her a convincing smile, but it was so sheepish. Hinata shook her head at him. Naruto, we're going. She simply told him in reply. She had no idea why he didn't want to meet her ex. They were on good terms now, so there would be no fighting between the two. Naruto groaned and banged his head on table. I don't wanna meet your boyfriend. He whined. Ex-boyfriend. Hinata corrected and sighed. Naruto, we have to do this. You have to meet Kakashi. He could be a big help. And don't you remember the promise you made to Sakura? Naruto groaned again. She just had to bring that up. He thought gloomily. Of course he hadn't forgot the promise. It was the biggest thing he had done since he woke up. He didn't regret the promise, he felt a little happy he made it. He was doing something for someone else. To be honest, he would have. He brought Sasuke back for her even if he didn't promise. But every time Hinata's ex-boyfriend came up, there was this feeling inside of him. It was an unpleasant feeling. And he didn't like it. It was as if that feeling was eating him up whole. What was this feeling? Jealousy. That word rang through his head. He did not enjoy this feeling, he did enjoy this feeling one bit. Naruto lifted up his head and let his chin rest on the table. Fine. He decided the sooner they get it over with, the better. He couldn't even say no, he had to do this. He had to do it for himself and others. Good, now eat your breakfast. I don't like this. I don't like this one bit. Naruto told Hinata with a frown upon his face. That was about the 10th time he told Hinata that. And it was almost the 100th time he told himself that. Because he did not like it. He crossed his arms over his chest to show how much he was against this. Hinata rolled her eyes with a smile. She had gotten used to his attitude today. Oh, Naruto, you're acting like a child, she said teasingly. Naruto groaned and uncrossed his arms. Let's just get this over with. He groaned aggravated. Hinata shook her head at him and hesitantly knocked on the door. She had called him earlier that day after their visit at Sakura, and explained about the whole issue. And he agreed to help them. But now she felt nervous about seeing him again. It had been a while. And she didn't know if she had quite forgiven him for leaving her when she needed him the most. Well, she guessed she'd have to forgive him anyway. The door opened and out came a man. He wasn't all that tall. He had dark brown hair and sharp dark eyes. Hinata found her heart racing uneasily. Inuzuka Kiba. She found herself trembling a little, so she decided to say something as she looked up at his eyes. She opened her mouth, but before she could even form a word, Kiba leaned over and kissed her. She was shocked, so shocked she was completely still. She didn't kiss back, nor did she pull out either. What was she to do? She was so confused, she didn't want to do anything that would make him not want to help them. Naruto, on the other hand, wasn't thinking the same way as Hinata. His brain was working quite differently indeed. Of course he was shocked, but there came that feeling again. It filled his veins and ran through his body. He just wanted to punch the guy, but he resisted that urge. He was also trembling, but in his own anger and jealousy. He felt as if Kiba was just punching him in the chest. He was also mad with Hinata though too. Why didn't she pull back? Seriously. He thought she said this guy was her ex. He acted like they were still a couple. And this was too frustrating. If only he could punch this guy. Hey, that wasn't such a bad idea. He balled up his fist ready to do the deed. This was going to feel so good. Before he could even throw his fist, Sakura's sad face flashed in his head. It was as if she was begging him to stop. If he did punch Kiba, he would let her down on finding Sasuke. So Naruto clenched his fist as his side. He closed his eyes to calm himself down. Naruto grabbed Kiba's shoulder and moved him away from Hinata, breaking the kiss. Then he smiled pleasantly. It was fake. Hey, there man, let's focus, he said as nicely as possible. He sounded pretty friendly, so Kiba smiled as well. Yeah, sorry, I guess. All those old feelings were coming back, he said sheepishly. Naruto scoffed, but Hinata smiled softly. It's fine, Kiba. She coughed and gestured to Naruto. This is Naruto. My patient. The one I told you about over the phone. She told him suggestively, giving him this look. Kiba seemed to acknowledge the look she gave him and nodded at Naruto. So what, is he suicidal or depressed? He asked, jokingly. He knew Hinata's job as a special therapist. Neither. I have amnesia, Naruto told him, not finding his joke very funny at all. Hinata sighed at Kiba. And Kiba slowly nodded. But you know the best part about amnesia, Kiba? Kiba arched an eyebrow. Oh, Anyo, what? He felt a little more than awkward now. Naruto simply grinned. I forgot. He shrugged lightly as part of the joke. They all laughed. Kiba and Naruto's laugh seemed more real though. Hinata laughed awkwardly and nervously. "Why don't you guys all come in?" Kiba said, welcoming them inside. Naruto made sure to stay between Kiba and Hinata. He was not letting this guy any closer to Hinata. Never. Though he did take his time marveling around Kiba's living room, it was nice and little messy. But he couldn't blame him there. If it wasn't for Hinata, Naruto's place would be messy as well. Naruto then turned his head to the sound of a dog. Out came a white and brown puppy. He barked at Hinata and ran toward her. Hinata smiled and bent down to pick him up. "Aw. You're still as cute as ever, Akamaru." She cooed before he nuzzled her. Hinata giggled at Akamaru. Naruto and Kiba both smiled at the lovely scene. "He missed you," Kiba told her, walking closer to her, "and so have I." Hinata looked up back at Kiba's eyes. Again she felt nervous under his gaze. "I hate dogs," Naruto suddenly said, saving Hinata from Kiba's gaze. But she also had to look at him with that questioning look. She tilted her head at him and Kiba frowned. "Since when did you hate dog?" She blinked at him innocently. "Since today," he simply replied with a shrug. Hinata gave him a skeptical look. Kiba smiled at Akamaru and took him from Hinata's hands. "Well, I love dogs. I lived with them all my life, I would even call myself one." He laughed and Hinata smiled. "I guess I hate you too," Naruto said jokingly, but at the same time he showed his dislike for Kiba. Hinata could tell that was not a joke. Even Kiba wasn't laughing, so she laughed instead. It was forced but sounded real enough. "Naruto-kun, you are hilarious." She quickly turned from him to Kiba. "Anyways, about the coordinates." "Oh right." Kiba set down Akamaru and Hinata hand. "D him the little paper with th information written down." Kiba looked down at the paper and frowned. "Ah, these are a special type. I would say it's more of a code though. But do you think you could encrypt it?" she asked, hopefully looking at him with her beautiful eyes. Kiba grinned and stroked her cheek. "Anything for you, Hinata," he said softly. Hinata gave him a smile despite the fact she was uncomfortable with his touch. "I'll have this thing down in no time." "Good," Naruto said, stepping in between them again. Kiba looked at Naruto quizzically and Naruto glared at him. He gave him that look. The look of, "I know what you're up to." But Kiba smirked at him. He was going to get Hinata again. Hinata was slightly confused, she hadn't noticed their face conversation. "Guys." "Hi, Hinata," they said simultaneously, both turning to her. She pointed two fingers to the paper, the coordinates. It didn't take long to get the work done, just as Kiba said. But Naruto had hated every minute they spent with Kiba. The guy kept postponing by flirting with Hinata. And Naruto would have to had his snarky comments. Seriously, this guy couldn't get the message to just back off. It was highly annoying, so as payback he had accidentally broke some of his belongings. But Hinata kept ruining the point by apologizing for him. He put it out that he clearly did not like Kiba. Finally it all came to an end and Kiba had got the location of this meeting place. And it only took about 20 minutes. "Okay, I've got it." He wrote it down on some sketch paper. He handed it to Hinata, but he held her hand for a little while longer than expected. When he let go, Hinata smiled politely and Naruto glared daggers at him. "We'd better be going," she said, looking the paper over. "I'll walk you out," he told her, walking past Naruto. And he did just as he said he would, he walked Hinata out. Though Naruto tried to stay in his way as much as possible. They made it out onto the porch. They were home free. Naruto smiled, more than happy to know they were leaving this place and that loser, who was trying to steal his girl. His girl. "I guess this is goodbye." Hinata tried to hide her relief. Kiba made her feel so nervous for some reason. Actually she knew the reason. She hadn't forgive him for leaving her, and also could she trust him? She believed she could. "Hinata, I know I left you after your cousin died. But I want you to understand I never meant to hurt you. And I didn't know what to say or do for you. So I thought you didn't want me anymore," Kiba said suddenly. He was apologizing. Naruto now understand. He shook his head at Kiba. What kind of boyfriend left their girlfriend just because she was mourning? He wanted to say something to Kiba, but again Hinata spoke first. "I forgive you." Naruto was shocked and Hinata was a little shocked herself. But she really did mean it. She forgave Kiba. Kiba smiled and sighed relieved, and I was wondering if you would give me a second chance. Now this guy was pushing his luck. No, Hinata answered automatically. Naruto smirked at Kiba's sad face. Oh, is there someone else? Yes, there is. Naruto and Kiba both asked simultaneously. Oh great, now he had to compete with some other guy. Compete? What was he thinking? Hinata was his friend. What he meant was, now he has to fend off this other guy. Yeah, that was it. Can you give me a clue who this guy is? Sorry, it's a secret. She looked at Naruto from the corner of her eyes before looking back to Kiba. Bye. She walked away. Kiba had noticed how her eyes shifted, sadly Naruto didn't. Hey, Naruto whispered to Kiba. Do you know who it is? Kiba looked at Naruto, dumbfounded. This guy was dense. Why don't you find out, Uzumaki? He crossed his arms. Naruto smirked. Well, as long as if it's not you. He laughed evilly at Kiba before walking in the direction of Hinata. When he turned around to see Kiba's face, he saw one of Kiba's fingers in the air. He was flipped off. Again, though Naruto noticed something else as well. On the jerk's wrist was that tattoo. The red swirl. At that moment Naruto didn't feel so good. Hinata, he said once he was walking right beside her. Do you trust Kiba? He asked. He was not so sure he did. Hinata blinked at him. Well, yeah I do. She nodded. She was being completely honest. She did trust Kiba, especially now that he apologized. Okay. Naruto said with a smile content with her word. If Hinata trusted him then so did he. But that didn't mean he had to like him. I still hate him though. He made it clear to Hinata. There was no way they'd ever become friends. And who's the other guy? He questioned timidly. Hinata blushed and looked down. Oh, Naruto, that's a secret. She said with a gentle smile placed on her face. She was in love. And even Naruto could tell. And it made him feel a little sad. This guy must be pretty awesome. You can tell me though, Hinata. He told her, practically begging her. He even pouted. Hinata giggled and shook her head. She refused to answer. And Naruto couldn't help but noticed her blushing harder. No, I can't. You're embarrassing me. But Hinata, Naruto whined. Kiba watched them walk off. They were babbling about something and Naruto was pulling on Hinata. He frowned at them until they were out of sight. He didn't like where their relationship was going. But he didn't have time to think about it. At that moment he needed to call into headquarters. He left the door and grabbed his phone. He dialed in a number and waited patiently for the other person to pick up. A woman picked up. Her voice was raspy and sounded in charge. What do you have to report, Inuzuka? Uzumaki and Hyuga were here. He replied, while taking a seat. The woman scoffed, so. She's doing her job. And if this is about you and Hinata then whatever. She can do whatever she wants to get that information from him. Plus you broke up with, not my problem if you still like her. You're a dog anyway and. The woman went on this whole rant about him. After she was done Kiba spoke. What I was trying to say is that I found out where a certain special house is located, thanks to Hyuga. He smirked. The woman was quiet for a moment. You don't mean, their house? Kiba nodded. Yes, Karen. I mean that house. Wow, we've been looking for that house for years. And it just turns up. You'll get rewarded. And now, I should send some people over there. Karen told him. You might want to wait, Uzumaki and Hyuga are going there right now. Karen sighed through the line. Okay, whatever. I'll wait to tell them. And, Karen, what? I think we should keep a close eye on Hyuga. Naruto eventually gave up on the mystery guy Hinata was in love with. But he would make sure to keep his eyes up for him. When he figured out who it was then he'd have a little talk with him. In the meantime he just had to make sure no guys started getting too friendly with Hinata. It was the best he could do. Why was he so serious about this? It wasn't any of his business, yet. He just didn't want to lose Hinata. He groaned and turned his head to look at her. He smiled and grabbed her hand and she didn't pull back like she did with Kiba. He was happy at that. Okay, here we are. Hinata announced, when they made it to their destination. They had to take a cab to the place. And surprisingly it was a long cab ride. They had drove out of the city to the outskirts of the town. There wasn't a lot of houses on the outskirt, but the neighborhood was really nice looking. You could tell people took care of their homes. Naruto and Hinata stepped out of the cab. Though Hinata went around it to pay the cab driver his money. It wasn't Seto this time strange enough. Naruto just looked up at the house he stood in front of. It was very nice looking, but it did look a little old. And in the backyard there was a little playground. And the curtains were slightly open, so he could see inside a little. Whoever lived here must have had children. But that didn't make sense, Kakashi was supposed to be here. Well, unless he had children. And then Naruto's heart stopped. He was completely still, he recognized this house. Hinata, he said when she came back. Yes, Naruto-kun. She glanced at his pale face. She was now concerned. Naruto opened his mouth, but no words came out. They were stuck in his throat. He blinked and took a deep breath. This is, my parents' house. My parents' house. Hinata was quiet and looked him straight in the eyes. She didn't know why, but she didn't feel so good as she looked. At Naruto's eyes, which were filled with hope, and a slow smile crept onto his face. Kakashi is with my parents. Hinata's heart stopped as she looked at Naruto's grinning face. She could tell he was very excited. But something in her told her this was not good. It didn't seem right. It didn't seem right at all. She honestly didn't believe Naruto's parents were alive. No, she knew his parents weren't alive. He told her himself. But saying that to Naruto's overjoyed happy face would kill him. And it would kill her. She felt herself shaking a little. This was a bad idea. And what if Kakashi wasn't there anyway? She just didn't want Naruto to get hurt. Let's go. Naruto exclaimed, more excited than she'd ever seen him. Hinata was dying inside as she watched Naruto dash up to the front door. She felt like balling up. What would his face look like when he figured out his parents were dead? Ah! Hinata ran up to Naruto and grabbed his hand, stopping him as they stood right in front of the doorway. Naruto, she said quietly, barely even audible. He turned to look back at her with those eyes filled with excitement like a child's. Just so innocent. She swallowed back hard. She couldn't tell him. Just don't expect too much. Naruto laughed with joy in his tone. Sure. He grinned and let go Hinata's hand to knock on the door. She felt so guilty. She was guilty, honestly. Just leading him on like this. And so much more. Sakura was right, she had to tell him, but there was so much more Sakura didn't know. So should she really take the Pinket's advice? She was so confused about herself. What was wrong with her? What was she doing? It's open, Naruto said, interrupting her thoughts. She looked back up at him. He was just as confused as her. Before she could question to go in or not, Naruto stepped in without a second thought. Hinata gulped and followed him in. The light was dim inside because the curtains weren't open all the way. But you could still see good enough. The house was nicely furnished. But child-friendly. It really did look like a small family's, also did look like it needed a little dusting. Naruto walked around like he owned the place. He first went to open the curtains up better. Then he walked around the living room curiously. He knew where everything was, he could feel it. But he also felt that some things were out of place. Someone was definitely here, it had to be Kakashi. Hinata watched as Naruto quietly walked around and feel everything with a small content smile. It made Hinata feel horrible. Usually when she saw him like this, it would make her feel warm. But she knew that he was not going to find his parents. And just knowing that and seeing his excited face was really killing her. Suddenly they heard someone moving around in the kitchen. They both looked into the direction of the kitchen. They could see someone coming. The once comfortable silence was now tense. Naruto squinted his eyes as the figure came up, revealing the silver-haired man. Again it was quiet but less tense and more of relief. The man easily leaned against the doorway frame to the kitchen holding a steaming mug of coffee. He was looking right at Naruto. "It took you long enough to get here," he said, coolly. It was still quiet when he walked over to Naruto, and Naruto just stared right back at him. "Aren't you going to say anything?" he asked, tilting his head. Hinata couldn't help but wonder how he could stay so calm. She was a nervous wreck right now, even if it didn't show. Naruto finally uttered out as he looked at Kakashi. He wanted to meet Kakashi so bad. But he didn't know what he was to say when he met him. He just looked up at the masked man and then down. He sighed and clenched his fist. "I was waiting for you, Yano," he yelled, more irritated than mad. "Every morning I got up wondering where you were. You weren't looking for me. Instead you had me come all the way to meet you. Who do you think you are?" He ranted and he pointed a finger accusingly at Kakashi. Hinata was only slightly shocked to see him yell at Kakashi like that. Though, she could tell he was happy to see him. And Kakashi must have known the same because he simply smirked and said, haha. Sorry about that. He scratched the back of his head. I got distracted with other matters. He looked to the side. Whatever. I don't want your petty excuses. Naruto crossed his arms defiantly. Again he had that feeling. That he knew this guy so well, even if he couldn't remember him all the way. He knew Kakashi, and it was easy to talk to him. Kakashi chuckled nervously. Even if you did get amnesia, you still haven't changed, he said warmly. At that Hinata smiled, it was true. Oh, thank Kami he was the same. Anyway, I called you here to talk about important manners. Very important. Naruto snorted, can you believe this guy, Hinata? He pointed a thumb toward Kakashi. He said he called me for important manners. Naruto said, adding the air quotations. Of course he wasn't really mad, well maybe a little. I guess I'm not that important. Kakashi had stopped listening to Naruto when he saw Hinata. He hadn't noticed her before because she was on the other side of the room. But now he saw her clearly. Hinata couldn't tell what he was thinking, but he was burning her with his eyes. She couldn't help but squirm. This was a bad idea. Coming here was a bad idea. A lot of things were bad ideas. She looked down away from Kakashi's piercing eyes. Naruto then noticed how Kakashi stared at Hinata and frowned. Anyo, Kakashi. He felt a bit uncomfortable too now. What was his deal? Kakashi snapped out of his strange trance and looked back at Naruto. He was quiet again until he coughed into his fist. I didn't know you had brought others over. He said slowly. It was as if he was trying to say something without saying it. He was giving Naruto some look. But sadly Naruto didn't understand at all. Well, it's just Hinata. My friend and doctor. He blinked at Kakashi. Unlike you, she was there for me. Naruto pursed his lips at Kakashi and arched a brow. He was not letting that go anytime soon. Haha, yes, sorry. Kakashi nodded apologetically at Naruto. But we seriously do need to talk. He glanced at Hinata from the corners of his eyes. Alone, he added. Naruto furrowed his eyebrows at him with a hint of confusion. Why? He asked, suspiciously. Hinata blinked at the once again silence. This time it was awkward. I'll wait outside, she said holding up her hands. Kakashi and Naruto's heads snapped back to her. Is it okay if I wander around the backyard? There are some really pretty flowers planted there. Sure, of course. You can even pick some. If you want. Kakashi told her politely. And without hesitation she exited the house, happily. She felt that she didn't belong there right now, and she didn't. How could she stay there when she was lying to Naruto? Kakashi turned back to Naruto. Now, why don't you have a seat? He told him, sitting down on the couch and setting his mug down on the coffee table. Naruto took a seat in the recliner. For some reason Kakashi seemed to chuckle once Naruto sat down. What? Naruto looked at him, curious as to why he was laughing. Kakashi stopped his chuckling and smiled sadly at Naruto. It's just that. Seeing you in your father's chair. You look a lot like him. At this Naruto's face lit up. Oh yeah. He looked at the chair with more interest than ever. He could remember himself sitting on his father's lap in this chair and his mother sitting on the arm as they read little books. He smiled warmly. Where are my parents anyway? Kakashi shook his head. I'll tell you later. First we need to talk, he said, leaning back in his seat. Naruto looked right back at him with a serious look. Shinobi. Kakashi started off. As an organization, right? Naruto cut in. Kakashi raised both brows at this. He was shocked that Naruto knew. Yeah, I dreamed about it. I know what shinobi is. He explained. Oh, so you dream your memories? He asked, very interested. Naruto cupped his chin, only bits and pieces. And they're never in order either. I see. Kakashi looked up and became quiet. So, if you know what shinobi is, then you know it's corrupted. Right. Naruto nodded curtly. I got that from Tsunade's letter. He told Kakashi lifting a finger. Wow, well you've been getting around. Anyo. But what does this all have to do with me? Naruto, you are a ninja. Kakashi said, with his eyes still on the ceiling. Yeah, I have the mark. But, you and Sasuke were assigned to a mission. Kakashi interrupted him as he began explaining. So Naruto didn't mind. There was a little part of Shinobi just outside of Konoha. They held and took care of all the information. But they were pretty messed up. The leader of Shinobi had no control over them. It was more like they were partners with Shinobi, to be honest. Anyways, they sometimes gave out information of Konoha to other villages. Finally they got this list. It had all the names and information of the criminal masterminds. So you can imagine how much that would help Shinobi with their missions. Naruto was quiet, yeah, but he edged him to go on. There had to be a catch. But they weren't willing to give Shinobi the list at all. They wanted money for it. So you and Sasuke's mission was to infiltrate their building, get the information and come back. As simple as that. You two were there for 2 weeks before you could get your hands on that info. But you guys did it. But something happened. Naruto sighed, feeling as if he already knew. Well, of course, you two were caught. Only you got away with the info. Sasuke was left behind. Probably killed, Kakashi said quietly at the mention of Sasuke's name. Naruto's jaw tightened. He didn't want to believe Sasuke was dead. But there was such a big possibility that he could be dead. No, he made a promise to bring him back. You, Naruto, lost your memories, which was definitely not part of the plan. The worst part is you have the only copy of that information. And no one knows where that information is except you. Why me? Naruto pointed to himself in shock. He had this info. Yes, Naruto. Shinobi is closely watching and so is the info building. They want that information. And they want it now. But only you know where it is. Naruto blinked. I can just give it to Shinobi. No. Kakashi shook his head and sighed. Didn't I just tell you Shinobi is corrupted too? Oh yeah, Naruto mumbled, looking down. How do you know all this anyway? He asked, already knowing the answer the minute the words came out of his mouth. Why, I'm a ninja too. He smirked, showing Naruto his tattoo on his arm. And I'm your sensei. Naruto smirked as well. Okay. Kakashi sensei. Then what do I do? First you need your memories back, so you can find out where that info is. Yeah, but how do I do that? I mean, me and Hinata are having very slow progress. Naruto snorted and groaned. Kakashi chuckled softly. Tsunade can handle that. She has to do a procedure that'll make you remember everything. Ah, really? Where is she? He looked more excited now. In hiding. I can't bring her to you just yet. Kakashi mumbled, looking out of the window where Hinata was sitting next to the winter flowers. Naruto looked at Kakashi strangely. Okay. Hey, what about Sakura? Kakashi turned back around to look at Naruto. What about her? Anyo, does she know about Shinobi and Sasuke and stuff? No, Shinobi is a secret organization. You can't tell your loved ones you're a Shinobi agent. They'll be in danger or Shinobi might be endangered. So yeah, she doesn't know about it. Though, I do worry for the girl. The information building my T thinks she knows something about where you have it hidden. So I asked Itachi to watch over her. He knows Sasuke wouldn't forgive us if something happened to her. Naruto sighed and slumped back into his chair. He closed his eyes to suck up all this information. He'd never imagined he was an agent, or to be more exact an elite spy. A ninja. This was a turn of events. Wow. He whispered to himself. So when do I see Tsunade? When you're ready. Kakashi gave him a card with an address on it. Why can't you just take me to her now? Kakashi stood up and shoved his hands into his pockets. Do you want to look around the house? He completely ignored Naruto's question. Naruto frowned at Kakashi, but the man didn't back down. So Naruto stood up and started walking with Kakashi around the house. He first showed him the kitchen. Then there was his bedroom. Naruto stayed in there longer. He touched all of his old things and smelled them. He looked around at everything. Joy was building up in him. And when he saw his parents' room next, he flopped on the bed. This was really his old house. He smiled warmly as he sat up. It's good to be back. He laughed, happily. Kakashi just looked at him with a solemn face. It almost scared Naruto. He didn't know why, but the whole time he was nervous when he first stepped into the house. He was so afraid it might not be real, that this really wasn't his parents' home and that they weren't here. Speaking of which, hey, Kakashi, where is my parents? Kakashi sat beside him and sighed. I knew I was going to have to answer this question. Naruto just blinked at him. Naruto, your parents are dead. They were killed when you were only 8. The air to the room was hard to breathe all of a sudden. And he was hurting. The smile on his face just left. He blinked again as Kakashi waited for his reaction. Naruto turned to look down at his feet. He didn't know what to do. Was he supposed to cry? Or be angry? He was so confused. The Uzumaki sighed. He wasn't surprised to hear they were one bit. In fact, he kind of felt from the very beginning they were gone. That was why he was so nervous. He just tried to hold on to that false hope they were still alive. Everything was just going wrong with his life. He wasn't going to cry for them. No, he was sure he did that when he still had his memories. So this should be old news to him. Naruto flopped back on the bed and laughed. Kakashi-sensei. I don't know what to say. He continued to laugh, but he was only laughing so he wouldn't cry. Because he wanted to cry more than ever right now. I just don't know anything anymore. Kakashi was quiet. Your parents were also ninjas. They moved their house all the way out here so Shinobi wouldn't know where it was. After they figured out how corrupted Shinobi was, they quit. And they were planning on telling the government. Shinobi wasn't having that. Your parents knew this, so they left you at a foster home. And after that they were killed in a car accident. As if that made him feel any better. Naruto stopped his laughing and sighed again. He swallowed down the lump in his throat and used his arms to cover his eyes. No, he was not going to cry. He didn't want to cry. He felt those tears coming. Why was this happening? Kakashi got up and pulled something from the bedroom closet. Almost the same thing happened to the Uchiha clan. They decided they wanted out and they were all killed. Except Itachi and Sasuke. Sasuke was out at school and Itachi was on a mission. They lied to you and Sasuke saying it was some other enemy. They lied to all the children's parents they killed. He went quiet when Naruto didn't reply. Here, you read this letter once before. Maybe you should read it again. Kakashi handed Naruto the letter he got from out of the closet. Naruto sat up and held the letters in his hand gently. He looked at it front and back. There was no stamp, just two names. It said, from Mom and Dad. Naruto looked up at Kakashi as if he had to have permission to read it. Kakashi simply nodded at the letter, telling him to go on. The letter read in careful cursive. Dear Naruto. If you are reading this, that means we are no longer alive. And you have reached the age of 18. It really is sad, and we never hoped for you to read this. You probably were very confused, sad and maybe even angry with us. We apologize sincerely. We never wanted you to get hurt, emotionally or physically. If we brought you with us you would have gotten hurt and possibly even killed. We could never let that happen to our precious child. Naruto. We want you to live a healthy life. To find love, friends, and another family that will take good care of you. We want you to get married, have children of your own and have the wonderful experiences we had. Of course your life will have bumps in it, but that's life for you. If you trip, you just have to get back up. You can't give in just because some little things that get in your way. No, you have to keep going. With or without us. We're sorry we won't be there to help you or teach you things we wished to teach you. But don't you doubt for 1 second that we love you. Because we love you more than you could possibly imagine. We hope you sincerely understand, Naruto. You are our most special and beloved son. So keep going on with your life. Love, Mom and Dad. Naruto read the letter over twice. As he read it he could hear his parents' voices in his head. His mother's strong but gentle voice, and his father's patient yet sturdy voice. It was hard to take this in. It was like an answer he was waiting for. He needed someone to tell him these things in this letter. Little did he know that the people to tell him this were his dead parents. Dead. It seemed so hard to accept they were gone. They wrote this before they dropped you off at that foster home. It took them days to write it. Kakashi told him in a soft whisper. Naruto slowly glanced at him as if he was expecting more, he had such a stoic face. Kakashi painfully looked back at his glassy eyes. He was quiet, not knowing what else to say to the blonde. He just thought those words would give him comfort. Naruto slowly turned back to look at the letter in his hands. He read it once more. Again came that sharp pang in his chest. This feeling really was annoying. He opened his mouth several times to say something. He didn't know what to say, he didn't know what he wanted to say. He continued to look down at the letter in his hands. Drip. Something wet fell onto the letter. What was it? Drip. Again something wet fell onto his letter. Seriously, where was this water coming from? He looked at Kakashi for an answer. The silver-haired man looked at him with a little shock before calming back down. Naruto, you're crying, he whispered. Well, that explained the wet feeling on his face. He used his hand to wipe away the tears off of his stoic face, but it didn't help much. More tears built up and rolled down his face. Naruto sighed as his eyes drooped. I'm crying for my parents. He paused for a while, his voice was so straightforward. Two people who love me, more than anything. And, he swallowed down hard. His voice was now shaking and his lip was quivering. Naruto's stoic face was now gone, there was only the look of a heartbroken person. I don't even know their names. He finished in a burst of tears. He sobbed in his hands, unable to control himself. Kakashi awkwardly patted his back, not knowing what else to do. Minato and Kushina, he said barely above a whisper. Naruto looked up at him with a quizzical look. Those are your parents' names. Naruto nodded slowly and his eyes overflowed with more tears. He quietly thanked Kakashi and sobbed a little more. He honestly didn't know what else to do. He didn't want to do anything else. It was shameful for someone his age to be crying, he knew that. But in his situation, was it really shameful? Well, Kakashi didn't seem to think so. After what seemed like an hour, but in reality only a few minutes, Naruto wiped away the last of his tears and stood up. Kakashi, can I keep the letter? He asked, folding the letter back up delicately. It was one of the only things he had of his parents left, and they had specifically left it to him. Of course. Kakashi smiled through his mask at Naruto. Naruto smiled back softly and gave a nod of gratitude. Then he safely placed the letter in his pocket. Hinata's probably waiting, he told Kakashi awkwardly, not knowing how else to say it. He shoved his hands into his pockets. Right. Come on. Kakashi walked out of his room ahead of Naruto. The Uzumaki stood there and glanced around his parents' bedroom just once more. Are you coming? His previous sensei asked from the hall. Naruto turned to him and nodded. Anyo, why yeah. Kakashi left him, which gave Naruto another chance to look around. He didn't know why, but he felt as if he was saying goodbye to this house. He shook the thoughts out and went back to the living room where Kakashi was waiting. She's still outside, Kakashi said from the window. He was behind the curtain watching Hinata. Naruto came over to have a peek as well. The young woman was sitting in the snow still in her spot next to the winter flowers. She only stood up to pick flowers from the tree she was standing under. Naruto genuinely smiled at her. She looked peculiarly beautiful, when her dark figure stood out in all that white snow. And she looked even more beautiful when it started lightly snowing. The woman turned around and held her hand out to catch some snow. She too, was wearing a genuine smile. Naruto's smile widened at that. Kakashi noticed Naruto's smile. His face seemed to lighten up when he saw Hinata. This scared him a little. Naruto, do you like Hinata? He questioned the blonde with a slight frown. Naruto shrugged lightly, she's my friend. He simply answered. With that reply, Kakashi closed the curtains, blocking Naruto's view of Hinata. The blonde turned to Kakashi, who now had a stern face. Kakashi-sensei, can you trust her? Kakashi looked at Naruto with serious eyes. Honestly, Naruto was taken back at that question. Could he trust Hinata? What type of question was that? Of course he could. He trusted her more than anything and anyone. Yeah, of course I can. Naruto exclaimed. He became a little angry with Kakashi for even asking such a question. Are you sure about that? He asked again, which angered Naruto even more. Kakashi spoke again before Naruto could even scold him. I mean, she did have your medical file. I'm pretty sure she knew your parents were dead. Naruto's frown deepened, but he didn't say anything. Kakashi must be right about that one. Well, I never asked, he said, desperately trying to defend Hinata. Kakashi gave him this. Seriously, look, did you have to? He was right. He didn't need to ask if they were alive. Hinata could have told hi. The moment they stepped in front of this house. It sickened him to even think of Hinata this way. Naruto didn't even want to talk about it anymore, he just wanted to go. So when he turned to walk away, Kakashi grabbed his arm. All I'm saying is make sure she's trustworthy. Especially before you come to Tsunade. She quit, and I've quit. Shinobi will be after us. Naruto glared at Kakashi and yanked his arm out of his grip. He knew Kakashi had every right to be suspicious. He was doing a very risky thing just meeting Naruto. Naruto, does anybody else know about our meeting? Kakashi asked. No, Naruto stopped himself. Actually someone else did know. Kiba. But Hinata trusted him, so it was no big deal. Kakashi didn't need to know, right? It wouldn't make any difference. Naruto. Naruto swallowed back hard. There was this one guy. But we can trust him. He didn't even believe himself. He didn't trust Kiba really, but Hinata did. That was why he was satisfied. Why? Because of Hinata? Kakashi asked, already knowing that was exactly why. He sighed. What was his name? Naruto didn't answer. He was afraid to answer. After all, Kiba was a ninja, and he just come to realize this. Naruto. What was his name? Naruto balled his fist and closed his eyes to think. Tell him. Just tell him. But if he told him, he felt like he would be making Hinata look suspicious again. Naruto snapped his eyes open again. Kiba. He finally responded. Inazaka Kiba. Kakashi silently cursed to himself. Damn. He looked around. You should go and don't come back to this house. I won't be here. Naruto nodded and headed to the door. And Naruto. Kakashi called out to him. The blonde still had his back facing him as he stood in the doorway. Please make sure you can trust Hinata. Shinobi will do a lot of bad things to get what they want. Quote. Naruto simply nodded and stepped out the door. It was outrageous, the idea of Hinata being part of Shinobi. There was no way. No possible way. Kakashi didn't understand that. He didn't understand at all. Hinata was kind, gentle, sweet and loving. There was no way someone like her could be part of Shinobi. Just no way. His angry and hurried footsteps slowed and softened when he approached Hinata. She turned around to face him after she heard him coming. She smiled at him softly with little snowflakes in her dark hair. She never looked more beautiful. It's snowing, she said to him softly and spun around once before facing him. Naruto chuckled. Thanks for the news flash, Captain Obvious. He replied, playfully. Hinata found herself chuckling with him. The laughing died out quickly though. She smiled at him and all he could do was smile back. It was a comfortable silence. Then Hinata's smile slowly dropped. You were crying. She stroked his face where the tears had once been. She looked at him concerned. And Naruto asked himself, how could he have ever doubted her? Naruto shrugged lightly, no big deal. He sighed, looking down. It remained. Him once again his parents were no longer among the living. Hinata gulped. I'm sorry I didn't tell you earlier. I just didn't want to see your hurt face. She whispered to him. Naruto didn't reply. That made sense to him. What she had just said. Hinata was a gentle soul, and was always concerned for him. So, in Kakashi's face. I know, it's not much, but here. She handed him a bundle of flowers that she had picked. I was getting them for you. Naruto looked down at the flowers that were in his hands and grinned at her. Arigato, Hinata. He replied quietly. Hinata smiled with pink cheeks. And who said girls couldn't give boys flowers? Anyo, we should go. Hinata looked at him a little surprised. Ah, okay. She nodded and grabbed his hand hesitantly. Naruto grinned at her and led her away. There was no way Hinata could betray him. She was his friend, and he was starting to think she was much more than that. It's still snowing. Hinata sighed, as she looked outside the window. It was about 2 days since they had last seen Kakashi. And Naruto said he was going to see him again soon. But he never told Hinata how. She just hoped he hadn't got any weird coordinates like the last time. She wasn't looking forward to seeing Kiba again. Naruto-kun, she said, turning to him. The Uzumaki was sitting on the couch. He glanced at her quietly and looked back down at his feet. He had been quiet all this morning. There was something bothering him, and he wouldn't tell her what it was. She slowly walked over to him and crouched in front of him. Oi, Naruto-kun. You know you can tell me anything, right? So let's not keep things from each other. She said sweetly and held his hands. Strange enough he made no effort to hold her hands back, like he would always do. She looked up at his stoic face and he replied, his voice barely audible. And you won't keep things from me either, right? Hi. She felt like such a liar. That was because she was a liar. She needed to clear her head. I'm going to take a quick shower. She let go of his hands and stood up. He still sat there looking quite serious. It pained Hinata to walk away leaving him there. In the shower Hinata scrubbed her troubles away. It always helped to bathe. After she was finished she dressed and went back into the living room where Naruto should be waiting. But when she came back in there the blonde was nowhere to be seen. She checked around her flat, and when she didn't see him she looked in his flat across the hall. Still nowhere to be seen. She became a little scared. Where was he? Wait, she didn't check her room. Hinata dashed back to her flat and into her room. Hinata busted the door open and when she saw Naruto in there she sighed relieved. He had his back facing her and seemed to be holding something. Naruto-kun, what are you doing here? She asked sternly. You frightened me. There was no reply. He just stood there completely still. Naruto-kun, she whispered, worry clear in her voice. Naruto slowly turned around to face her. In his hands he held that photo. Hinata's heart skipped a beat. Her eyes looked to her drawer and saw that all the drawers to it was open. Then she slowly looked up at Naruto's face. She was afraid of what she might see. Naruto was wearing a frown. A frown of confusion, hurt and betrayal. And what he said next just killed Hinata. You're a liar, Hyuga Hinata. Music filled the apartment as he walked around with a cup in his hand. The living room was full with people, and the band was playing a happy-sounding song. The beat was really nice and fun. He tapped his foot lightly while he waited. He was waiting again, for someone. Then he heard the doorbell ring. He smirked, they were here. He walked past a few people to get to the front door. Once he made it, he looked through the peephole. There he was, Sasuke. He stood there with his hands in his pockets. And next to him was a beautiful woman. That must be Sakura. It was about time he met her. Naruto swung the door open with a grin. Took your precious time getting here? He asked, mockingly. Sasuke stepped inside with Sakura. I sure did. He smirked as Naruto closed the door. The blonde shook his head at Sasuke. The one thing they'd never stop doing was quarreling. And honestly, they liked it that way. They were rivals after all, and didn't know any other way to communicate with each other. And who may this fine lady be? Naruto looked at Sakura as he led them to the living room, where most of everybody was. Sakura curved her pink lips into a smile before parting them to answer, but Sasuke did that for her. You already know who this is, Dobi. It's Sakura. My girlfriend, the one I tell you about when you ask. Sasuke wrinkled his nose at Naruto. Naruto only rolled his eyes, yeah, whatever. He sighed and looked at Sakura. Anyways, it's nice to finally meet you. Sasuke has said many things about you. He winked at her. Really? Sakura glanced at Sasuke and smiled at him. The Uchiha looked away. He really is cute. I, for one, don't see what women see in him. He shook his head at Sasuke which only caused Sakura giggle a little. Sasuke rolled his eyes. Yeah, well at least I have a girlfriend. He commented. Naruto harumphed and folded his arms. I could get one, I just don't feel like it. Of course you could. Sasuke said nonchalantly. Here birthday boy. He shoved a box into Naruto's hands. From us both. Happy birthday, Naruto. Sakura told him joyfully and hugged him. Naruto smiled at them both and hugged her back. After a while Sasuke pulled Sakura away from him, feeling that they were hugging a little too long for his taste. Naruto continued to smile at her. Thanks, Sakura. He nodded at her. Sasuke coughed into his fist. Oh and you too, Sasuke. Naruto said nonchalantly. The black-haired man knew he was just doing this to mess with him. So anyways, we've got food and drinks, music and the band. Naruto gestured around the room. Kakashi-sensei is ALR. Edie here along with all the other party guests as you see. Sasuke looked around the room and Sakura did the same. I see. He simply smiled slightly. I'll get you 2 drinks. Naruto told them before walking off to the kitchen bar. He was happy to finally meet Sakura. She was definitely a keeper for the guy. She looked pretty and tough. Usually Sasuke didn't bother with women, but he claimed he wasn't gay. Of course Naruto would always tease him about that. Naruto on the other hand liked women, though he couldn't get much dates. He had the looks, and the kind personality, but he was so naive. That would probably be the best word for it. The point was that he was happy for Sasuke. Naruto smiled when he made it to the kitchen bar. He had to walk past a few people to get there. And he made a stop to drop off his gift to open later. The blonde picked up 2 cups and turned around to go back to Sasuke, when he bumped into someone and spilled the drink over her. I'm sorry, I didn't see you. Naruto grabbed some napkins and handed it to her. The woman smiled at him with forgiveness. It's fine, she replied, with a hint of sadness in her voice. She graciously accepted the napkins and wiped her dress with them. I don't really like this dress anyway. Naruto blinked as he stared at her. He recognized this had such a kind voice, it was really sweet and understandingly. The man wasn't as tall as him and she had long midnight hair. And she was very gorgeous. Hinata. After she finished cleaning her dress she looked back at him and then she came to realize something. You're the birthday guy, happy birthday. Naruto-kun, she told him sweetly. Naruto grinned, thanks, have a drink. He didn't know why he gave her a drink, he just did. And Hinata looked back up at him questioningly. But Naruto already walked away. Obviously this him didn't know Hinata. Here's your drink. Naruto gave Sakura the cup. She smiled at him thankfully and took a sip from it. Sasuke crossed his arms, where's mine? I forgot about you. Naruto lied, not wanting to tell him he gave it away. Plus, he was way more focused on something else at the moment. Who's that? He pointed at Hinata. She was currently leaning against a wall while holding her drink. She was wearing a stoic face as she watched the band play the music. Sasuke looked to where Naruto was pointing and smirked. Hyuga Hinata, duh. How do you not know who you invited to your own birthday party? He asked the boy while he shook his head. The blonde shrugged, hey, I invited almost everybody from work. Exactly. Hyuga works at the front desk sometimes when Karen is not in. You've seen her. Sasuke explained. She's also Neji's cousin. He added, quietly. Naruto frowned slightly as he stared at her. Now that he thought about it, she did look like Neji a bit. Sakura sighed which caused both of them to look at her. She's probably the saddest girl to hold a drink. She whispered, sympathetically. Well, it'd make sense. Her cousin is dead after she tried to help him and her boyfriend ditched her. Sasuke glanced back at Hinata. Naruto looked at Sasuke in disbelief. Her boyfriend ditched her. Why? Who? He leaned in on Sasuke. Inuzuka Kiba. Sasuke moved Naruto's face away from his own. He thought she was ignoring him when she was in her depression. Naruto found that he was very angry with this new knowledge. He was angry at Kiba for leaving Hinata, even if he didn't know her that well. It was wrong. She probably needed him more than ever right now. How could he just ditch her when she lost a loved one? Naruto knew that he would have never made it this far if Sasuke didn't have his back when his parents died. I think I'm going to talk to her. Have fun. Sasuke muttered before moving elsewhere in the party. Most likely to go chat with Kakashi-sensei. Sakura followed him, since she didn't really know anybody. Naruto, like he said he would, went up to talk to Hinata. When he was face to face with her, she looked up at him. Hey, he smiled at her. He honestly didn't know what else to say. All he knew was that he wanted her to be happy. Hinata slowly looked up at him and smiled lightly. It looked as if her smile would melt at any minute. She really did look sad. It made him feel a little sad. He was friends with Neji, they even teamed up on missions sometimes. He was a good guy. And he could tell Hinata must have been really close with him. How are you doing? He asked, politely. Naruto leaned against the wall beside her. She scooted a little away from him, which surprised Naruto a bit. Hinata nodded a little. I'm very well, thank you for asking. She replied just as politely, and even a little stiff. I know we don't each other that well, but I came here in Neji's place. She whispered. Oh, yeah, that's cool. Naruto glanced at her solemn face. He felt a little awkward, but he was going to make her happy. Do you wanna hang out or do something? Hinata looked at him with a little shock. What are you asking? She said, her voice laced with confusion. Naruto shrugged and grinned at her suggestively, he even wiggled his eyebrows. Hinata looked back at him and blinked. No, she shook her head, taking it the wrong way. Naruto, who didn't understand that she had took the wrong way, frowned. Why not? She walked away from him and into the dancing crowd. Naruto tried following her and only saw a few peeks of her through the cracks between others' bodies. He squeezed through and ended up finding her. The blonde grabbed her hand. Wait, I just wanna be friends. He explained. When she tried to go away again, You do. Hinata stopped trying to escape and looked back at him. Yeah, what did you think I meant before? Hinata blushed feverishly and gently pulled her hand out of his grip. Sorry. She was bumped into by some other person, but Naruto caught her. It's hard to talk on the dance floor. She mumbled, but Naruto could barely hear a word she was saying. Though he didn't need to hear her. He was thinking the exact same thing. What's one of your favorite songs? He asked, out of the blue. The midnight-haired woman looked up at him, La Da Di. I guess. She answered slowly, not quite understanding what he was getting at. Why? Naruto only grinned at her. Hey. I actually know that song. He let go of her hand and ran off. Hinata was quiet, shish. He couldn't believe he just left her in the crowd like that. Well, she guessed she could believe that. Even though this was her first actually talking with Naruto as a friend, she knew what type of person he was like. After all, she studied psychology and Neji told her a lot about him. So she wasn't surprised he left her like that. Oh, Neji. How she missed him. If she hadn't tried to make him remember, and only tried to make him move on. Then maybe he would be alive right now. She looked down sadly. Why did she even have this job? Why did Kiba leave her? Was it because no one wanted to around her? No, she couldn't think those things. She had to move on and her thoughts trailed off when she heard noises of someone messing with the mic and the music had stopped playing. She looked up to see Naruto standing with the band and a mic in hand. What was he doing? Testing, 1, 2, 3. He tapped the mic a few times. Is this working? He asked, speaking into the mic. Of course it is, Dobi. Someone yelled from the crowd. Yeesh, you don't have to be mean about it, Tem. Naruto mumbled, but everyone could hear it, considering the mic was right next to his mouth. The crowd chuckled. Dee and Hinata found herself chuckling a little bit as well. He was silly and it was kind of cute. Naruto was now whispering something to the musicians before turning back to the crowd. This song goes out to Hyuga Hinata. He waited patiently until people cleared a pathway to Hinata. She stood there completely shocked. What was she supposed to do? She felt so embarrassed. All eyes were on her. Finally she got the hint and walked forward. Naruto grinned at her and began singing La Da Di. Hinata was getting a box full of surprises today. Everyone laughed and clapped before continuing their dancing. Hinata watched as Naruto sung his song and glanced at her a few times. She just stood there not knowing what to do. Dance. That seemed like the best option. But her feet wouldn't move, she didn't care. Now why Naruto decided to sing her a song, but it made her feel really happy. She smiled at him with appreciation, then she felt a little braver. She laid her hand on his and began singing into the mic with him. They found themselves smiling at one another as they did so. When the song was over everyone was clapping and Naruto laughed a little. Why did you start singing? She asked him, still quite curious about the whole ordeal. Naruto blinked and shrugged. Oh, I just thought it would be fun and make you happy. Hinata shook her head and laughed. He was exactly the way Neji described him. You are too good, Naruto-kun. I know. Naruto laughed. One more song. Pumped his fist into the air. You up to another duet? Hinata shrugged. She had nothing better to do. Sure. They found themselves singing numerous songs. Such as, Long Kiss Goodbye by Halkali, Bring It On. By Dev Parade and Hoshi no Yutsuwa by Switch Star. But the most fun to sing was Bring It On. They ended up stopping because they were losing their breath. So they let the band take back over. The two were now on his balcony and looking over the lights of Konohagakure City. It never got old, the view was just too amazing. They both leaned over the rail and stood there quietly. It was a little cold outside, but mainly just windy. A gust of wind swept over them. Naruto shivered, but Hinata didn't even wince. She just let it whip right through her hair as she looked down over the city. Naruto couldn't help but stare at her. She was very beautiful. He couldn't see how Kiba left a woman like her. Naruto coughed into his fist to regain concentration. You're a terrible singer by the way. He coughed again. I heard that. Hinata laughed softly as she turned to him. Naruto smiled at her gently and sighed. She looked so much better when she was happy. You really are an amazing person though, Naruto-kun. She sighed to herself. You always know how to move forward and I always stay in the same place. Everyone seems to leave me behind. Naruto watched as her smile slowly disappeared. Hinata crossed her arms over the rail and laid her head on them. I'm sorry for saying that suddenly. She sighed again. And then she felt an arm wrap around her shoulders. She looked up and saw Naruto smiling at her. Hey, it's okay. I know how departing from someone feels and I definitely know how it feels to be left behind. He nodded at her. He remembered how much hard work it took him before he became an elite shinobi agent. But you can't give up, ever. That's what my parents told me. Hinata had completo. Why forgot how hard it was for him to become a ninja. He was just so good it was hard to believe he had any difficulty. And she even forgot he lost his parents at a young age. She felt a little guilty about that. But at the same time she felt hopeful. Naruto's words had really cheered her up. Thanks, Naruto-kun. Sure, we're friends now. Naruto grinned and let go of her. But, if you really want to show your appreciation, you could always kiss me. Hinata laughed and gently shoved him. No, I have to be going. Ah, why? It's too late for me to stay out. Don't get me wrong, I'd love to party with you, but okay, let's have a party at your house. Just for me and you. Hinata thought about it for a moment. Okay. Naruto grinned. Awesome. He grabbed her hand and dragged her off of the balcony and back inside. He walked over to his Sasuke and Sakura. We're leaving, you're in charge. He didn't even wait for Sasuke to answer before he dragged Hinata out. It was a strange party, but it was fun. It was a new experience for Hinata. She never really had any men over except family and Kiba. And Naruto was never boring. He had so many funny ideas of fun for the party. First he had went through her album and made fun of the fact that most of her songs were old. But he was just playing around with her, because he had liked most of those songs. Then he decided to put one in and then that's when the party really began. They first started to make drinks, but Naruto's drink didn't seem too appetizing. And Hinata told him she was not drinking it. So to try and get her to try it, they ended up playing a guessing game. Each would take a turn putting on blindfolds and trying different drinks, then guess which was which. Of course Naruto had an epic fail. He was never really good at these type of games. Hinata on the other hand was really good at the game. She got almost everyone right, including Naruto's drink. She later on told him that it tasted really flavorful. After that whole game Naruto suggested a watergun battle. At first Hinata laughed, because it was such a childish game and she ended up getting a water shot in her mouth. So she wanted revenge. It was a fun battle that lasted 10 minutes, before Naruto won. She had let her guard down by laughing at how serious he took this. But she wouldn't let them play any more games until they cleaned up the water. Because they were wet, Hinata had cut on the heat for them to dry. Then they sat on the couch just to simply play video games. Hinata had lost this as well. These games weren't even hers, to be honest, they were Kiba's that he left over. She had never touched them. So Hinata lost the first round. But she challenged Naruto to a second round. And Naruto could never turn down a challenge. So they played a second time. Hinata won, hook, line and sinker. When she played the first time, she was just trying to learn the controls. And now that she knew them, it was easier to play. She had noticed that she hurt Naruto's pride a bit. So she decided what they should do next. And so there they were, sitting on the couch, one of them on both ends, holding a notebook and pen. The game they were to play was another guessing game. They would ask a random question about one or the other. Then they would have to answer that question and the person who the question was all about would have to write the real answer. Then they would reveal their papers. What's Naruto's favorite color? Hinata asked Naruto, and then they both went to writing. After 5 seconds, Hinata spoke. Time's up. Turn over your sheet. They both too. RNED their sheets over and on both papers was, orange. I knew it. She smirked. Naruto rolled his eyes and smiled. Yeah, it was obvious. And it was obvious. Most of the time Naruto would wear some form of orange. Okay. Hinata's favorite food. They both quickly scribbled something down in those 5 seconds. Turn your paper over. On Hinata's paper was, cinnamon rolls. While on Naruto's was, ramen. Hinata blinked at him. Ramen. Hey, I wasn't quite sure. He shrugged. Plus ramen is so good I thought it might be the best bet. Hinata laughed at Naruto and shook her head. They continued playing the game for a while and learned a lot more about each other. At the beginning of their little party they were so hyper and drunk off of happiness. Now they were still very happy, but more sluggish and tired. The more they played the game, the more Hinata felt comfortable with Naruto. She started to like him more and more every second she spent with him. He was a very nice and warm person. She was happy to be a part of his life. And she was glad that he knew Neji. It made her happy to know that she wasn't the only one sad now that he was gone. Somehow, the two ended up on the carpet floor from the couch. Naruto was laying on his back and Hinata on her stomach was laying right beside him. "It's late," Hinata whispered to him. She knew he was much more tired than her. And he needed his rest. After all, Shinobi could text him when his next mission was at any moment. "Yeah, I should go." Naruto sat up lazily. This was really fun. He grinned at her. "Arigato, for the awesome time." Hinata sat up as well and smiled. She should be the one thanking him. After all, he's made her feel so happy, and it's been a while since she felt this good. "This was fun, I'll never forget this day," she told him sincerely. Naruto stood up and helped her stand up as well. "Do you have a camera?" he asked her, tilting his head slightly. Hinata walked away without answering. She soon returned with a camera. "Awesome. Let's take a picture, so we really won't forget." Hinata grinned. "That's a wonderful idea." Naruto wrapped his arm around Hinata's shoulder and she leaned in next to him, almost laying her head on his shoulder. Flash. The photo was taken. And it was quite good looking too. The picture really captured how happy they were. They almost looked like a couple. "You can get it printed out, right?" Naruto asked. Hinata nodded. "Sure, I could." She was interrupted by the beeping Naruto's phone. The blonde pulled it out of his pocket and read the text he was sent. His face went from carefree to serious. Hinata could only guess he had got another mission in. She found that she was right when Naruto explained, "Looks like me and Sasuke got another mission. The meeting for it will be held tomorrow." He yawned. "Can I get my copy some other time?" "Yes, of course," she told him as she walked him to the door. They stood out in the hall and Hinata sighed. "Sue, can I have that kiss?" Naruto asked, wiggling his eyebrows. At this Hinata laughed and blushed. He was just too cute. So she grabbed his collar, pulled him down a little and stood on her toes. Then she gave him a peck on the cheek. After she was done she lowered herself and let him go. He had a hint of pink in his face when she looked back up at him. "If you want a kiss mouth to mouth, then take me on a date after your mission," she told him nervously. Naruto grinned. "Now, that I can do," he exclaimed. "Just wait for me, okay?" She grinned back at him and watched him run off. She would wait as long as it would take. Naruto's eyes slowly opened. He just laid there thinking. He didn't rush to write it down in his journal. He didn't rush to tell Hinata. He didn't do anything. Nothing at all. Except lay there. That's all he wanted to do. He was so confused. So very confused. Why was Hinata in his memories? Or was that just a normal dream? It didn't feel like just a normal dream. He could feel, see, and understand his feelings completely in that dream. So it had to be a memory. But that still didn't make sense. He never met Hinata until after his accident. Plus, if he did meet her before, she would have surely told him. Right. Naruto slowly turned on his side to think better. Was she working for Shinobi too? She must have. After all, why would he easily talk about Shinobi in front of her? And there were some other hints that she did. If Hinata was working for Shinobi, why was she helping him? Or maybe she wasn't helping him. Maybe she was simply helping him to get the information out of him. Like Kakashi said, Shinobi really wanted that list. Though Hinata was too nice and too sweet. She would never do anything to hurt him. So then why didn't she tell him about their past together? The Uzumaki fingered his necklace before taking it off and setting it on his desk. He also sat up. It was like going through amnesia all over again. He had so many questions and no answers. He didn't know not one darn thing anymore. Maybe it really wasn't a big deal. Maybe he could just let this go and trust Hinata. Or he could ask her about it and she would explain, hopefully. Why was he suddenly doubting Hinata? She didn't do anything wrong, not that he knew of anyway. Every time he tried to defend her, there would be some other dark thoughts coming in. He honestly didn't know what to think anymore. He was so confused. It didn't make sense. Naruto shook his head and prepared himself for the day. He decided not to think about it. But he couldn't help but find himself thinking about it every few minutes. And he kept putting on this sulky attitude. He wanted to confront Hinata about it, but he was afraid of the answer she'd give him. He was quiet all morning, and he was always dazing off in his thoughts. He hadn't even noticed how much he worried Hinata. They were sitting in her living room as he continued to think, but he never got any answers to his questions. It's snowing. Hinata sighed as she looked out of the window. She glanced at him when he didn't answer. Naruto-kun. Naruto wasn't quite sure why, but he couldn't answer. All he did was glance at her and look back down at his feet. Then she slowly walked over to him and crouched down. Oi, Naruto-kun. You know you can tell me anything, right? So let's not keep things from each other, she said, sweetly, and held his hands. Naruto was barely able to look her in the eyes, but he had to. He didn't hold her hands though. He needed to ask her the question, but instead he asked her a different question that would suffice. With a stoic face, he replied, his voice barely audible. And you won't keep things from me either, right? His heart was pounding at what she'd say next. Hinata was silent for a moment, too silent, then she gave him a nod. Hi. She stood up, as if she was in a hurry to leave. I'm going to take a quick shower. And she walked off. Usually Naruto would be content with her word. But he wasn't content at all. She was lying. She had to be. No. He couldn't think that. Hinata wouldn't lie to him. Kakashi's words kept going through his head. Over and over again. Could he trust her? Could he? Well, he could check her room for some clue that night was really real. Right. Yeah, that would do just fine. But it would be wrong to go through Hinata's stuff. He felt so uneasy. Naruto stood up. That night had to be real. Right. So what was the proof? They were in her apartment. So there must be some clue. Though if she was trying to hide the fact that they knew one another, then she would leave no clue. No. She left clues. The watergun battle. Those were the same waterguns they used when she cheered him up. They were from that one night. And there was that song La Da Di. It explained why it was so familiar. He needed more proof though. And he was pretty sure it was somewhere in her room. He could go check it out and find out if she's a fake, but if she wasn't, then he'd feel really bad. He'd feel like he violated her trust. Naruto sighed. He had to take that chance. Naruto waited until he heard the water running in the bathroom before checking her room. He looked under her bed, in her closet. Then her drawers. He looked from top to bottom. He tried not to make a mess. But his heart was pounding so hard against his, was so scared that Kakashi's suspicions were right. Then he saw it. His heart stopped. Naruto carefully pulled the photo out. He just stared at it. It was the one from that night. The date was written on it and everything. No. He whispered in disbelief. No. He groaned and shut his eyes. Why was this happening? This wasn't supposed to be happening. She said not to keep things from each other. She kept this from him. She was a liar. So many feelings were running through him. He felt anger, sadness, disbelief, and betrayal. He was so lost in these feelings he didn't hear Hinata's footsteps, either that or he didn't care. Why should he care? Hinata busted open the door not too long after. He had his back facing her. So he didn't see her. He didn't want to see her face. Naruto-kun, what are you doing here? She asked sternly. You frightened me. He felt that he didn't have to answer her. She was the one who had to do the answering. Naruto-kun, she whispered in clear worry. Naruto slowly turned around to face her. He wanted to show her how angry he really was, but all he could do was frown. And what angered him more was that she didn't look at his face first. She looked at the photo, then to the drawer, then his face. Now it was his turn to say something. But what? There was never enough words to go around. You're a liar, Hyuga Hinata. He told her with all the anger and venom he could get out. Hinata had winced at what he said. But what she did next was sigh. Like it wasn't a big deal. And that made Naruto even more angry and shocked. Was she going to explain herself? Who are you? He glared daggers at her. He had never spoke to Hinata this way before. She looked up at him with a very expressionless face. You know who I am. Her fingers went up to her own shirt and she started to unbutton it. Naruto had no idea what she was doing. Then she pulled her shirt down past her left shoulder. And she revealed to him her tattoo. The red swirl. I am a ninja. And my job is to get that list from you. At any means necessary. That's it for today, I will stop here. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you please consider subscribe and make sure to hit that like button, share with your friends, and don't forget to check out my Patreon. Details in description.